I'm going to call the session of the Board of Revision to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. With me is Brett McIntyre, farthest to my left. Next to me, Marla Billinghurst. My name is Harvey Diamond. The city assessment there is represented by Jonathan Spacek, and our assistant is Kelsey Harrison. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision has been requested are described in each application, and we will limit the discussion to those matters. The statement that the applicants or the assessor may make at this hearing must be sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to a matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparative assessments of properties are not considered as evidence by our board. Our board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence that we hear and that alone, and we issue written orders that we mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that our decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemption from taxation, and should a party wish to appeal, the information how to do so will be included with our order. With respect to the hearing process, I will refer the matters to be addressed to each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's evidence, followed by questions, and then the applicant may provide their evidence, followed by questions. Each party will be given an opportunity to sum up if they wish to do so. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The person will repeat for each matter on the docket today, and after all the applications have been heard, we will be adjourning this hearing, delivered in private, and we'll issue our written order, which will be sent out by registered mail as soon as possible. The information today is being recorded. The form of public record is also being live streamed. And Kelsey, you can swear in the parties. Thank you.
Would you like to swear in? Could you please state your name?
Jonathan Spacek.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
Thank you. Could you please state your name?
Ron Nico.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Bishop, you can proceed when you're ready on the first one. We'll do is 20 Searfield Boulevard.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair. We are looking at roll number 0309-166-1300, 20 Searfield Boulevard. This is between Waverly and Henlow. I've included a picture of the map on page 2. You can look and see exactly where it is. We have a 2020 value of $14,703,000, but I'm making a recommendation to reduce this assessment, as seen at the bottom of the page, to $12,650,000, as you can see on page 7. So if we turn to page 7 quickly, anything I reference for this hearing will be off of the income approach worked up on this page here. So what I did was, the real reason for the change in assessed value is I put 70,756 square footage on one PID to represent the office space between the two buildings, and then there's 24,000 square feet, which is the same as the original income workup, but I've reduced the value to $5 from $8.35 to try and better represent what this basement parking storage space is used for. So I'll go over that as it comes, but and I've also just near the bottom at the capitalization rate. The original capitalization rate was 6.7%, and I've increased it half a point to 7.2% to better represent the larger size of this office space compared to a smaller OFS. But again, I will go over those as I get closer to it, but I will present the recommendation.
Mr. Newfield, were you aware of the recommendation?
I got it now, yes.
And is it acceptable to you?
No.
Okay.
I will continue.
Continue,
Thank
please.
you. Alright, so where I was the 2020 value.
Sorry, an interrupt. I'm reserving the right to address it in my summation.
That's fine. You can submission.
Well, it's just because it came after the evidence was due, and so I had something to say about that.
What do you mean?
Well, but certainly puts you in a better position. The recommendation certainly.
Well, yeah, but I just, you're right, I just a handout later.
Yeah, but you're not prejudiced by it.
No,
Anything is lower rate.
No, I just, just following the rules of evidence, that's all.
What do you mean? I handed this on time.
No, but in response to what I'm saying to you.
Anyway, you don't
Don't
proceed.
worry about it. Nothing to do with you, don't worry about it.
Okay. I'll continue.
You're fine.
Alright, I'll continue. Again, there are two buildings on this property, as you can see on page 2. One's built in 1995, the other 1999. The total leasable area across both buildings is 94,756, which is the same as the gross floor area of the building, as it is owner occupied. I will say there's approximately, at the bottom right there, we have indoor parking 0, outdoor parking 0. There's approximately 36 indoor parking stalls, part of that 24,000 square feet in the basement. And we have approximately 356 stalls on this lot outside for this building. You can see that on page 2, aerial view and the street view. This is a Shaw building owned by Shaw. Page 3, some more street view pictures of the property. And page 4, one more aerial, so you can see the 2 different buildings there. Again, you can see at the top, it's on page 4 here, just it is a Shaw Communications building, so it's you know, somewhat broadcast, somewhat call center, somewhat office. It has satellites on the top. It's not exactly your standard 2 or 3 story OFS building, but just make sure you look at that. Page 5, they've always complied with our request for information, as you can see at the top of the page. There was a sale in 2012, but it's a consideration of $1. Again, information on that sale I don't have. I'm not putting any weight on that. Page 6 is the old workup for the income approach to value, and page 7 is my newest one. So again, I've explained those changes, but if you go to page 7, we are giving the overall office space of this building of 70,756 square feet, a market rate of $12.76. So that is our model generated rent for that square footage. I've kept that, and then I've adjusted that 24,000 square feet to $5. It's a mix again of parkade, storage, mechanical. I put a $5 kind of what I consider a standard storage base rent on that for that space. That works out to a blended rate of $10.76 for over the whole square footage. We are using our 5.5% vacancy allowance for standard OFS buildings. And then again, expenses, what I will go over here is, I'm sure everyone has heard it before, but I will just point out a couple things, and if you have more questions, you can let me know. We can treat it like that to start. So what we used to have is a 5% management fee last cycle. We are now just using a 2% non-recoverable expenses fee. What I will say quickly is I've attached an addenda that you'll start to see on most of our workups for income producing properties on page 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. I'll reference them on this appeal, but then going forward, I won't do it every time. I'll just go over it on this one. So if you turn to my page 17, what I'm pointing out here is what we were considering 2020 a fresh look. We were just pointing out here that we, as an assessment department, we have to do a brand new market values every 2 years, and that is part of that is taking a look at what's happening in the market and what's being reported to us, and our best way to come up with that final market value can change over cycle to cycle. So this cycle, we've determined that the net rents we are using in our model to build for income producing properties, they do not include management. Management is being taken off and recovered. The net rents we are using in our model do not include that management, so we don't need to take off management after the fact. These net rents are, pure management, if that makes sense. And then we've also looked at what are the average non-recoverables for, different types of property income producing across the city. And if you look at my page 19, what we've done with some of the properties that have been brought in and used as examples, we've went over these non-recoverable expenses and actually determined what is the non-recoverable expense for a property that owner is looking at. And the way we are doing that is we are taking the potential gross income, which sometimes is different than what somebody thinks in, because we are taking into account that vacant space and giving it a potential gross income. We are taking off vacancy and shortfall, and we are determining what actual percentage of their potential gross income is being, what is under that non-recoverable expenses, such as capital costs, being worked out to. We do not, one of the major differences when we're looking at this 5% to 2% is the argument's kind of becoming, it should be more than 2%. The owners need to spend more than 2% to make up those non-recoverable, or they're spending more than 2% a year, and you should be allowing a higher expense in that. We are showing that the actual median over 29 different buildings is 1.06%. The 2% is fair for a non-recoverable fee, and then we are not taking off anything for management because it is being recovered when an owner is charging a net rent. So Again, that's just kind of a quick overview of what's come back and forth on some of these arguments so far. But if you have any questions about that 5, the old 5% being included now being taken away, feel free to ask and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. But going back to our income workup here, I was at that 2%, so we're taking off 2% for expenses, and then we are taking off $7 for shortfall. So for that vacant space up above at 5.5%, we're taking off $7 a square foot, and taking off that as an expense as well. And that is coming up to a total net operating income, and then our capitalization rate for this property added up to 7.2% from our standard kind of what was coming with our standard OFS cap rate. I brought it up because it's such a large square footage of office space, and there is a higher risk involved in that, in my mind. So that works out to my total value of $12,650,000. If you turn to page 8, I have a list of comparables. I've included 30 OFS comparables, but I've tried to grab the bigger square footage OFS comparables because we're looking at such a large building in this case in a large leasable area. So some of the more comparable properties, you can look at my comparable 267 square foot boulevard. It's close by, it's just down the street. It's a single story OFS with a lease start date of 2015, a 12-year lease for 25,000 square feet, and it's leasing out at $18.92. If you look at another, what I consider a great comparable for this one is my 8th comparable. If you look at 365 Osborne, this is a 2-story office. It's more recent, built in 2006, but it is currently home to Bell MTS, and it is a 2-story office building, 75,000 square feet. It's leasing at $13.75 a square foot, a 5-year lease signed in 2017. Our blended rate for this building over 94,000 square feet is $10.79. And if you're looking at just what we have for the office space of 70,000 square feet, which is very similar, we're at $12.76. So again, in my eyes, those two buildings are very comparable, and comparable 8 is a good one to look at. Another one I found comparable looking through was comparable 17. It's 180 Main Street. So this is a 2-story OFS on Main Street. It is a 2-story call center. It is leased out for 5 years, signed in 2014 at $12.75, and it's a 39,000 square foot over space being leased for being used as a call center. So I consider that one somewhat similar. And those are the kind of the large space ones I looked at, getting above or closer to that 50,000 plus, for example. But using a multiple range of comparables, all trying to be higher square footage here, we have an average of $15.10, $14.20 weighted average, and a $14.56 median. If you turn to page 9, I've actually included what we've been bringing in for basement rental comparables. Again, this building is unique, and I've tried to express that. A 25,000 square foot of basement and storage, parking, mechanical space is not super common in the appeals I come across. So these are leasable, more office style spaces. That's working out to a weighted average of $10.51. But I put a $5 rent on it. I believe, due to economies of scale, due for what it's used for, $5 is fair for that size of space. If you turn to page 11, we have our capitalization rate sheet. So I'm sure you've all seen this cycle, but we do have the third column down is suburban A under office. So this is what we consider suburban office, OFS. You can see I've, again, I upped the cap rate to 7.2%. If you see the first group here, sort of kind of 4 columns over. City of Winnipeg, our low and high for OFS this cycle is 5.5 to 9.05%. If you take out the 20th and 80th percentile, we're at 6.2 to 7.3%. I'm at that 7.2, which is the higher range of our OFS comparables. Again, Colliers doesn't report on that. CBRE reports between 6.5 and 7% for OFSs, and Cushman and Wakefield present between 6.25 and 6.75 for OFS. So we're near the over the top range on both of those for OFSs on this property. And if you just quickly turn to my addenda again, on page 17 and 18, we've just provided some added capitalization rate evidence this cycle. So what somebody has went through sales of properties and stabilized their actual reported income and expense mailers over the years, and then developed an NOI and divided it by the sales price, or sorry, use the sales price to determine the capitalization rate. And you can see our range for office is between 5.1% and up to 6.54% of these five kind of that were analyzed by our department. So these aren't presented as actual direct cap rate evidence for this property per se, but it's just another addition we're throwing onto our brief to show that, hey, these are the cap rates we're coming up with. They're in range to a lot of similar type of properties when we're going through like more standard OFS. This is a larger one, it's a little different, it's gonna be a higher cap rate, but again, feel free to look at that if you want some more evidence on the cap rate. And just going back to mine, page 13, I always include the income and expense mailers. So this is an owner occupied income and expense mailer, so I just put in what was sent in online, but there's nothing, again, it's owner occupied, so they just only report expenses, and then there's no type of rent to report. So the only thing I will quickly talk about is, the only other thing I looked at for this lot, because it's been an issue with the past on the appeal, is Shaw owns both properties beside this. So if you look at my page 2, the property to the right is also owned by Shaw, and it is also appealed, and it's a separate roll number, the one to the right on my picture there, that corners Waverly and Skirfield. Is often asked to be removed due to, considered one economic unit. So what I usually do in those cases, I actually look at what's required by the bylaw for parking for a suburban office and see if it is required or not, if I'm looking at the parking for as being one of the main reasons as if one economic unit, which is often an argument for it. The lot itself, as I said, I counted, there was 356 stalls at least on this main roll number for the building, and then there is, there's other stalls on that lot beside it, but the lot is its own roll number, its own size, big enough to be, it has its own road access right to Skirfield, to be considered and have its own value. What I did was I just looked at the requirement for call centers. There's different requirements based on what the occupancy, what the building's being used for, and call centers required one parking spot for every 400 square feet. So if you consider this whole place a call center, it requires 177 stalls under the bylaw. Where this lot itself has 356, so it meets the requirement. If you look at it as an office or a broadcasting studio, that requires one stall for every 750 square feet. So if you work that out, it works out a requirement of 95 stalls. So that's just kind of some further research I looked into this issue, because I'm sure it's going to come up. But I believe after looking at that this lot itself has enough parking for a requirement. And the lot, it's great that they have extra parking beside, but they could sell that on their own, and it should be valued on its own. It's currently valued on vacant land, it's under appeal. I believe it should just be kept on its own and heard on its own. So that's my 2 cents on it, and that's my presentation. If you have any questions,
Thank
let me
you.
know.
Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Did you inspect?
I've never been to this building.
So why did you decide it was a call center or an office?
I'm just saying, again, I'm such a large space, 90,000 square feet. From what I've read over the history of this building, Shaw, do they do broadcast in there? Is it just office space? You can definitely let me know, but I'm trying to cover all the bases by saying it should be both, maybe used for both.
No, but wouldn't an inspection be warranted if you made that decision?
Absolutely. If I had time right now, I would love to walk through the building. I just don't have time.
Pardon me?
I would have loved to walk through the building. I just didn't have the time.
Now, if it were not the use that you had envisioned, would the value be different?
Our model for this one is standard OFS.
Right.
Yeah.
If it weren't classified as an OFS,
What would you like to classify that? I
Would-
can tell you. Try to.
that's not what I asked. Would the value differ?
What is this classified as, isn't it?
No, I said if it weren't OFS, would it have a different value?
I don't know, like OS, like depending on what it's classified, there's different rates for different types of
Well,
properties
it's an
across the
easy
state.
question. Would it be different?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it
Easy
could end up
question,
being the same.
Easy question, easy answer. Don't think too far ahead. You mentioned something about the sale that you never investigated, the reason for it. Do you know any reason, do you know why there was a change in the title of this on October 15th, 2012?
In 2012, no, I don't.
Okay. You never researched the replot?
No,
So at some point, someone transferred this property by reason of either ownership or legal, and they declared it land titles of value of $8 million.
absolutely.
So you didn't investigate that?
The 2012 sale, no, I didn't put much weight in the 2012 sale with consideration of $1.
Well, why would you put no consideration without investigating?
I didn't have a sales questionnaire on it, there was nothing else for me to look up on that sale, so I went with the market and the sale that, and what we have in place for.
So is the investigation limited to only what the sales questionnaire is?
No, that's just one thing, I look for a sales questionnaire when there's a sale, and then, you know, it's nice to determine what that sale was for, or why, what was included, what wasn't.
You talked about the bylaw and the usage of it. And if the use was different than the two you suggested, which one was call center, the other was office,
Yes.
would the parking requirement change as well?
Depending on what it is in the bylaw, it could be different, yes.
You also said they could sell it on its own, the second lot.
I'm assuming they could, yes.
Well, why don't they sell it then?
Well, they're using it right now, I'm just saying. it could
So they
be
have a
sold.
need for it.
They're using it as an extra parking right now, yeah.
Yeah, so they have a need.
Absolutely, you can
Okay.
say they're using it.
Your pictures, page 2.
Yes,
You know what that circle is of white objects?
they're satellite dishes.
Satellite dishes. Now, do they just watch a lot of TV, or did you investigate any other reason they might have satellite dishes?
Well, I imagine they'd be broadcasting something of some sort, maybe. I'm not a communication.
Broadcast or receiving?
Receiving, sure.
Right. And you don't know about the other components that Shaw does in this building, the service component and the technical components?
I am unaware of exactly what they do day to day in this building.
Do you have a Shaw account yourself by any chance?
I sometimes have MPS, sometimes have Shaw.
Okay, so where do you pay your bill? Do you know where it goes?
I pay it online, I'm not sure where it is
Oh,
exactly.
all right, you're too young to do like the rest of us do. We sometimes bring our payment right to this office, so you're not aware that they have a retail function as well?
Again, I assume there's many uses in 90,000 square feet, they probably do more than one thing in this space.
And what's the retail parking bylaw? Ranges
don't have
from
it.
1 stall per 100 square feet to 1 stall per 250 square feet, correct?
Absolutely, I would say for the portion they use of this building for retail, you could apply that and see how much parking they need.
The non-recoverable, which you are labeling as management, do you as an assessor, are you following orders to request this, or do you have any independent judgment?
I am following what we have done the cycle across all income producing buildings.
And you mentioned in your discussion of this that you had a number of ones that were adjusted, and that was on page 19.
Yes,
Now, these are not the assessment department's original properties, are they?
no,
And they were submitted by, I believe it was Altus, correct?
from my understanding, yes.
And you didn't put in the original number, did you? What they labeled as non-recoverable, did you?
No.
So somebody just came along, I don't know who, I don't think it was you,
It was not me.
and decided that certain expenses didn't belong here on your, like the assessment department decided this for presentation, right? This
Yes.
wasn't.
I didn't put this together and bring it in, we're bringing it in for all income producing
And
properties.
there was no order by any authority that these items should be removed?
What do you mean?
Like, it wasn't a court order or a municipal board order that said, we have to adjust these, this is just, they were simply adjusted as an argument presented by the
Yes, this is
city?
just purely rebuttal almost, just
Okay.
to the numbers we were presented.
Presenting your own position?
Yes,
Okay, and the items that were removed were generally, as I understand, commissions?
often they were either tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and usually one more, but yes, we're removing what we believe to be non-recoverable.
Okay,
Yeah.
was that because they were free?
What do you mean?
Didn't cost the landlord anything?
No, they're just,
They cost the landlord money, right?
absolutely.
But someone deemed they didn't belong.
Yes, we believe something like a large capital cost or a leasing commission should be looked at over a longer cycle than just the 1 year that it's
So-
in place.
Okay, well, that's a fair comment, but who pays for them?
The landlord,
Or the owner?
the owner, yeah, sorry, I don't, yeah.
So they exist as an expense.
Absolutely, they're real expenses.
There's just the argument is that the assessment department chooses that they shouldn't be considered in the statement.
Yes, the way we're looking at them is they should not be included as non-recoverables for assessment purposes.
And are you aware of their misquotation on municipal board orders on this
I'm not
subject?
aware of that.
Okay. On the capitalization rate discussion on page 17 and 18, you did say that these aren't to be used for the subject property, they're merely to support the workup done?
They're just support the overall, we make cap rates for all income producing properties, just to give you an idea of what area 5 sales and the cap rates we've derived. They're just for that extra reference to look at.
And the information for these, the income information for these 18 rates, was it model generated or was it actual?
For this property,
Yeah, yeah.
this property that.
No, sorry, page 18.
Page 18 for the cap rates?
Yeah, was this model generated or did this come from the mailer, or is there another source?
They're model derived cap rates. Like, what do you mean?
No, the income
The income is what's reported and stabilized.
reported on the questionnaires.
Yes.
Okay. So, take for example, let's pick one that I'm very, very familiar with. The last one, which was 1100 Waverly, which was sold September 2017. What would be the date of the mailer, do you know?
Again, I didn't actually put these cap rates together, I don't have any information on
But
the
it would have
specifics
been-
of them, so.
It would have
I
been
can't answer
due
that.
the previous April, correct?
Again, whoever did these usually does it 3 years stabilized, from my understanding, but I don't know specifically
Okay.
what was done for each
But-
single one.
But with the sale in September, the mailers come into your office in April. So the information is at least, by the time you get it, 5 or 6 months old, at bare minimum, right?
Well, yeah, and then the only income we're using is from a full year. Like,
Right, but the newest income you
Yeah.
have is at minimum on that one, 5 or 6 months old. So what would have
Yeah,
happened
sure.
in that particular property if there were changes in the income between the time it was reported to you and the time it sold? Would you know about that to derive your capitalization
We
rate?
wouldn't do that until our next reassessment,
Right,
and that would.
so there's a hole there.
Absolutely, we always have to, we're using a reference year, a reference date of April 1st, 2018.
Now, that particular property, I asked on that one because, as you may be aware, it was vacated by Manitoba Hydro 6 years prior. And it spent the last several years reabsorbing into the market. So on that particular one, would you agree that the mailers would not be quite accurate as they were reabsorbing onto the market?
Sure, for 1100 Waverly, I agree with you.
And then the assessment department don't know what happened between at least April to September when it was sold.
No, for.
And you weren't
yeah.
there in the transaction.
That's why we stabilized it over 3 years, and I agree there is a gap, and every 2 years, we're gonna relook at the newest income reported and go off the newest income we possibly
But
have.
should someone have attempted to stabilize that one, they would have been met with some very faulty information because it wouldn't have worked with the huge
Again.
vacancy that at one point hit about 80%, correct?
I do not disagree that we're only as good as the information we're given. We have to look at that information, stabilize it the best we can, and look into it the best we can.
Now, on Friday, one of your colleagues told me that one of these rates, 333 Ward, was not actually a sales rate, but it was derived from an appraisal that was in your possession. Were you aware of that?
I'm unaware. Is this for industrial?
No, it's an apartment.
Oh, yeah, for apartment, I am unaware.
Well, if this were the case, that you found out that the capitalization rate was derived from an appraisal that in fact did not even reflect the actual sales price, would you not question the reliability of that one at least?
Steve, you do appraisals, aren't they accurate? I mean, The fact of the matter is that an appraiser used cells to arrive at that evaluation.
That's absolutely nothing to do with it. They used the wrong number, they used an appraisal that was done for a
Well,
different
you could
purpose
argue
and
that.
function.
You could argue that, but-
And they did it several months after the fact. Our company represented that sale. It's a total horrible misrepresentation and misuse of an appraisal.
Well, I saw that appraisal, and it did say 5% of the.
Yes, you saw it too?
I did see it.
Jeez, I'm like the only person who hasn't. And it said
It's
18, and
it's getting around,
and it said 18.8 million on it, right?
I can't remember that.
Yeah, well, it did. It said 18.8 million, that's what I was told, and it sold for 18 million.
Anyway, you're asking questions of the assessor right now.
Yeah, but you butted in, and you know when you butt in, you're looking for trouble, right?
Well, I'm asking you questions. Right here.
And I'm not presenting evidence yet.
Uh,
So, in the event that you found out that, in fact, it wasn't as you described, but somebody misused an appraisal in here, would you not have some doubts about that particular one?
Again, I agree with you that developing a cap rate is subjective, and that is why there's always gonna be difference on them. Like, nobody's coming up with the exact cap rate, and I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you.
Okay, and what about if
Don't know what I
somebody,
can say.
what about if somebody bought a property here, that they intended for their own use, rather than as an investment? Would that?
To fill up the owner occupied, like you're saying, to make
Yeah,
it fill it up as owner occupied?
for their own business, would that be a reliable indicator of capitalization?
I'd be looking at the past, again, you're looking at 3 years before that person bought it for their own use. You can look at that cap rate for the income received. If they use it for themselves, we have to look at market rates, you know, I
The
don't.
capitalization rate, isn't the capitalization rate, the agreement between the parties as to how good the revenue stream is, for them to purchase it as an investment?
Absolutely.
And if there was no revenue stream contemplated in the purchase, does the capitalization rate have any credibility whatsoever?
Again, if you're using market income, I believe using market income is a good give or take indicator of that cap rate. Whether you wanna put a lot of weight on it or not, that's fine.
Several of these properties, I'm just looking at two here, for example, 3166 Portage, 3670 Portage, were sold on the same date. Did you look into that by any chance, or did your modelers look into your knowledge?
Sorry, can you just, which ones are these, which area?
These are in retail, 3166 Portage and 3670 Roblin. You notice they were sold on the same date?
Again, I did not put any of these cap
Oh,
rates together.
I know you did.
I can't answer on specifics on them.
Are you aware that the IAAO specifically advises assessors not to use portfolio sales for developing capitalization rates?
Again, and then subjectively, if somebody were to say, look at them separately and work up a cap rate on their own, you're putting less value on it, that's fine.
That's not the question. In mass appraisal, did you know that the IAAO, which is International Association of Assessing Officers, of which the city of Winnipeg is a member, and profess to follow their rules, have stated in their manuals that relying on rates, capitalization rates from portfolio sales is not an approved method?
I will trust that that is in the textbook.
Yes, it is. It's in your manual, it's in the IAAO manuals, and I'm just wondering, I know for a fact that it was a portfolio sale, because these are clients of ours. Now, we have different information than you, but you were just looking at the mailers, so there is an extra step there, is there not?
Absolutely, again, I agree.
Sorry, and according to my information, 90 Park Lane was purchased for end user. Do you have that in your information?
Again, I have no specific information on any of these cap rates.
And what's the 294 Portage, the first one on there? What property is that?
Somerset building?
Right.
Yes.
Now, do you happen to have the information on the vacancy at time of sale?
The vacancy was very high in that building. Like, if you were talking ranges over the 5 years around the sale from 10 to 23% or so.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Nectar, do you have any questions of the assessor?
Just one question, so there's no parking income?
There's no parking income, it's just owner occupied, and often when your suburban office, there's not a need to, you usually supply the parking, there's ample land, for parking included in the building. And then once you get downtown, it's a different story, if the bylaws require no parking or, so you charge for parking. That's the main difference between the two.
Even the people that park indoor don't pay for it?
I believe that's more for like service trucks and
Oh, okay.
for operations. I don't believe it's actually like indoor, but I don't know, it's just a guess.
Okay, that was it.
Ms. Bridges, no questions? And I don't have any. Mr. Neufeld?
Well, we'll start with the use of the property. It's certainly not as described by the assessment department, and that's the same issue we have every year. This is a whole series of business uses under one roof. It started off life as a satellite farm back in the days when transmission was predominantly satellite. Now the satellite is more of a secondary use in case the main lines have problems. And there is a satellite farm in the back. The second part of this operation was the technical part of which is called a head end. And a head end is where the main signals come in and then they're redistributed to homes now by fiber optics. So out of here, in come the main signals, and then they're redistributed and they're sent out to individual lines that eventually reach the households. And at this point, they do have control over the signal that's sent. There's also one very large area that's used for annoying us. And I say annoying us, if you've ever been waiting for a program to come on and they're simulcasting on top of it from the previous one, and you're going, come on, switch my program, switch my program. These are the guys who do it. This is where it's done. Because they have to, because this is a Manitoba signal, Winnipeg signal, and that's manually switched to get rid of the simulcasting. And the next function that had to be done in this property was a studio. This is to fulfill CRTC regulations that because they were granted a cable license, they had to allow neighborhood access. The studio is rarely used anymore. I don't even, I don't watch this, but if you have basic cable, I think that there's some shows that they do produce. I don't even know if they do them anymore, but it's in existence and it has to be maintained. The next function that came out of this was the installation function. So this is where the main installation of the lines comes from. Now, a lot of the work now is done by under contract with subcontractors, and then some of the work is also done by Shaw themselves. What is common to see is when, and you can see it in the aerial photography on page 3 in the corner, there used to be a lot of cables piled there, so when they have an expansion into a new subdivision, they'll bring in the cabling, store it here in a fenced compound, and then some of the trucks used here were involved in the original installation of equipment. Next after that came the repair of equipment. And the repair would be the trucks with the booms on them, who are all here. And sometimes they would need a boom if you still have the overhead lines, and sometimes if you're in a box, they would go into the box, into the joint use trenches, and fix anything that was required to do on site. What's interesting, as I said, a lot of the installation work has now gone subcontracted, because what happened is, I'm trying to remember, it was about 10 years ago, legislation changed which forced the utilities to do joint use fiber, because the fiber became capable, the new fibers were capable of multiple signals. And I don't even want to say a funny story, but it was Hedy Lamar who held the patent for a code division multiple access technology, which allows multiple signals on a single line. Her husband invented it, but she got the patent. So that's also how cell phones work. So with this technology, MTS, Shaw, and Bell, they could share their lines, and then they would each be responsible for the signal going from their own operation to a household. So it meant that you only need the one line going. You don't have, you can share it now. And so they tend to hire Crown Utilities now for their original installation between the parties. It's sort of like when all the beer companies found a company to deliver their beer instead of doing separate deliveries. So that was all part of the federal changes. The next function that they have is installation and sales of their equipment. So the boxes that you have in your home, the installers would come out, they would go to the box or the access point and install it, and then they bring the equipment and set it up and lease it. Then came the call centers. So there's call center space in here as well. And along with this all the time was the administration of the Manitoba territory was from this building. There are about 50 satellite locations of Shaw and their head ends, I think I get the terminology right, where the signal will come and get redistributed to a smaller city or town. And in Winnipeg, there's still one facility left, which is at 137 Victoria West in Transcona. It's still in use as a head end. Steinbach has one, Selkirk has one, and some small areas. Gimli will have one. And as I said, they used to be satellite fed, and now with fibers, they're going to fibers. My point in telling you this long-winded story is that it's not an office. It's a business operation with multiple uses, specially designed for its purpose, and shouldn't be classified as an office. As a matter of fact, there is no real classification for it. It's a telecommunications building, a modern telecommunications building. And over the time, as the assessor pointed out, they did buy more land. The parking lot that is to the east of the property used to be Melrose Coffees. When Kraft shut down Melrose, they bought the building, and for a while they were just storing product in there. They demolished it because their need was greater for parking. This is the business need. The building to the west, which you'll hear later today, is 36 Scurfield, and that was purchased to provide a service site for one brand of their vehicles that goes out to service sites. As I mentioned, there are at least three different forms of service they provide. And I've forgotten which one this is. I think this is the one that installs PVRs in 36 Scurfield. The basement on my page 4 is, you can see that it's parking for service vehicles. Now they have, I mentioned that they have the repair vehicles with the booms on it. They have service vehicles for installation. And a lot of the people who go out to install the hardware for client home use are actually under contract. And they don't even park on this site. They'll often have their own vehicles, and they'll have a certain area of responsibility, and they're on commission contract. Picture on page 4 in the top is just one part of one of the head end rooms. It occupies, in different portions of the building, probably 15,000 square feet of different space. Page 5, the top of page 5 is a control room. This is where the famous simulcasts are. I don't get to have simulcasts anymore. If you've moved to one of the, like Express View or Star Choice or whatever, or Shaw, whatever, they don't do the simulcast anymore, but if you're basic cable, you still do it. And top of page 6 is a separate room for a separate function. This is a mainline function. The bottom of page 6 is the studio, which last time I was there was still in place but not in use. So it is a very specialized building, and it is what it is. We looked at it in terms of being a lower class office, was about the best thought we could do for rent, and we applied that at $11.25. On page 7 are a number of rents in the area. You'll note that at the top of page 11, the closest comparable is probably 1100 Waverly. 1100 Waverly, we have several rents from that building, and this was a industrial strip that was mostly occupied by Manitoba Hydro, who over the years had converted it to more of an office use. The new users in there are generally all office. with a small mix of industrial in there. For example, the city of Winnipeg's recycling bin operation for Southwest Winnipeg is located in 1100 Waverly. So they have the office up front with administration, and in the back a lot of blue and gray bins. There's also a paintball place there, but there's also an engineering office there, and there's an NLCC bonded warehouse on site. So this is probably as close as we'll get to the use that is done in the Shaw building, is this mixed style of usage, which is not a glorified, or sorry, it is not an office in a warehouse building. That's called flex. This is a real working site that has a mix of office and working areas. And so 1100 Waverly is the best choice. Now the third one down is, shouldn't be in there, and I noticed the assessor has it as well. This is 24/7, who are in 905 Waverly. They're the owner of the building, and they purchased it. I think there's a short-term lease that was with Stantec, and then they moved out and put in their own call center, so it's owner-occupied. The fourth one down is 895 Waverly, and that's again a close use. That's I believe that's the IBM Xerox, or is it Xerox, former building. They used to be in there. It was a showroom and then a warehouse in the back. 1090 and 1080 Waverly are a mixed-use strip. It has two buildings. One is pure office, first and second floor, and the other building is office warehouse. Those are the ones that we think are the closest, because they're all in the neighborhood and they all represent the same style of usage. And you can see that from that we developed our rate. Now we put a rate of $350 on the basement, and it's an accessory use for parking. And we're, to tell you the truth, we're quite flexible with that rate. I just wanted to go back and see what we've agreed to in the past. Yeah, $350 was always used in the past, and I don't think the market went up for basement parking. It's to keep their vehicles out of the elements, because they deem them to be service vehicles, because in this day and age, our electricity can go out or our gas can go out, but if our television goes out, we're dead, and that's their business. So that's the concept behind it. As for the rates on the adjustments to the valuation for for vacancy and shortfall, I think we generally followed the OFS only because it represented the best market-based guidance on it. We did include, as the city calls it management, we call it non-recoverables, but it's utterly, I just bit my tongue there, just because I was going to say some bad words. It's irresponsible to disregard the non-recoverable costs. They exist. Appraisers have to apply them, brokers have to apply them. If we don't, we face sanctions, especially brokers. If they try to sell someone a property without declaring the non-recoverables, they are providing misleading information. And our book on page 40, I need congratulations, I have page numbers on these things finally. Page 43 and forward these are the numbers that came from statements. These are all properties that Colliers manages, and we went through them to look for the non-recoverables. Some of them are very high, and some of them have evened out. On page 47 is a graph that shows the ones that are reporting very high non-recoverable ratios, 30%, that's where there's been a turnover. And we did not include TIs past a reasonable point. I think our cutoff number was about 40,000, because after that point, we may have had to look at it as capital. So what the ones that are high represent are just properties with a bad year, where they have higher turnover, they have leasing commissions, they have some TI. We didn't end up relying on them. Instead of doing what the assessment department did and simply ignored them, what we did is we put them in a graph and showed you a building with a bad experience is gonna be in the 20 and 30% range, that they stabilize out at 7%. And that's the industry standard. That's what our brokers use when an owner asks them for a projection of income, and they try to sell a property, it's 7%. 5% for non-recoverables, 2% for replacement reserve. And that's what has been the truce with the assessment department since, as I first ran into this issue in around 1996 or 97. First time I remember that the assessor was making expressing some concern about it. It's a simple misreading of statements, and it's a simple misreading of theory. All theory supports this, including the IAAO, which is the standards the assessor must follow. It says in there you must consider non-recoverables, and 2% isn't enough. Every statement you look at will have more than that, and it can't be disregarded, because your job here on the income approach is to look at how much money it generates, truthfully, to establish a rate of return, not some hypothetical number that was developed in a very misguided fashion. As for a capitalization rate, normally I would think that on a rate of a specialty building is going to be very high. There's a property, one block, actually it's semi-adjacent to the southwest, which was built as a small-scale drug production. And buildings like that would have super high cap rates because of the cost of conversion. The only saving grace in this, for this particular property, is that it's got a good location, and you probably would attract a user who wouldn't be afraid of spending some money on making changes to it and changing the use. There's car dealers surrounding the place. So, of course, the building can't be used for a car dealership, it would have to be bulldozed, but the location is good. And without the location, we would be looking for a much higher capitalization rate because of the custom design of it. For example, no one builds basements anymore because it's cost prohibitive. There's no reason to have a basement. They do it because of their utility, because they deem themselves a utility and they have a need to do repair. So that's wasted money, wasted space, and not appropriate to the market. We have a couple of cap rate examples that I was going to look at, but by and large, you're not going to see a lot of suburban office cap rates because there's only probably 4 or 5 buildings that we classified as suburban office in the city of Winnipeg. The rest are mixed-use properties, and predominantly warehouse flex would be the next category you would look at, and this is not warehouse flex. So we had looked at some office buildings. First is on page 38, the top of page 38. This is downtown, and capped at 8.56%. And I don't know if there's going to be rebuttal or not. I've heard it all. It's nonsense. I don't manage this property, but this is a sale from Bank of Nova Scotia to the people at 24/7, which was leased up for time of sale, and it capped at 8.56. Now the next one is 905 Waverly. This was a short-term deal to Stantec, according to my information. It capped at 7.93, and it was built as an office, as a single-user office, not as an investment property. So the rate would have been in place for a short time while 24/7 determined how to absorb it into their stable of properties for their call center usage. So there's a bit of motivation. And then lastly, we do have a Class CD building from downtown on page 39, which is the one I'm in, capped at 9.13%. That's pure office. But now there are a few others in here, but I think that they're, 423 Main on page 38 is an interesting case in that it was vacant at time of sale, mostly vacant, but deals had been made for occupancy. So the people in the know had the deals ready before the sale was made. So it did cap at 10.06%, although it does still retain some high vacancy as of today. we have the Collier's cap rate information, which again, this is not a property that would be in our study because of it's a special purpose building. Our suburban office rate for this particular year ranged from 6.5 to 7.25, which did include provision, these are the purchasers' rates, so they include closing costs, which are land titles and commissions. So we always include commissions, because we like commissions. So the actual adjusted rate on this, on a suburban office, ranges from 7 to 7.75, and that's for a B, because we don't have any A's. And that is the same as the previous year from what we were tracking. As I mentioned though, this information wasn't based on sales of any properties that occurred in Winnipeg because we didn't really have any that were of these that traded. The 905 Waverly I mentioned before would have been a C or a miscellaneous. The rest were in the downtown area and not part of the suburban. I bet you I could name them all that are going there. 1780 Wellington, 5 Donald, Portage, 1661 Portage, and there's one other one. Well, actually, the Sterling Lion one might now be deemed a Class B building. So it's not an area that's tracked, and that's because investors don't want these buildings. We only track buildings that investors want. So it would tell you if you're not in here, you're not going to attract a good number. Now, lastly, we have consideration for the lot. That's the assessment for the lot next door. I understand what the assessor is saying, and our position on this is that if you're looking at this property as something more than it is, in order for you to reach that conclusion or for it to reach that value, you need the extra land. If you take it for what it is on the market, you don't need the extra land. So if you want to accept that the assessor has it as a building, you gotta take the land into consideration. If you say it is what it is, which is what we did, then you don't have to take it off. So that's our position. 8.8,932,000 would be the number as it is. If it's anything, if you think that it's anything more than this, then you have to subtract the land, because that's the only way you're going to get a higher value. And lastly, I did mention this. This isn't really, well, this is sort of rebuttal, sort of argument, sort of response to the assessor's request for, or recommendation for a decrease. This is the history of this property for the last 6 appeal cycles. Now, I'm not handing this out so that you can look at the numbers, because that's wrong. I know I can't do that, but you're going to look at them anyway. Why I'm handing you this out is to look at the history, what happens. Every year it comes out at an extremely high value, and every year, except the one, an assessor made a recommendation. And look at the size of these recommendations. That's because when it got to hearing, everybody understood it's not an office. We got it wrong. And take a look at 2014 for an example. That wasn't my doing, that was a recommendation. I got paid for it, by the way, so don't worry about me. But this year, it's a $2.1 million drop. The year before, almost $2.5 million. The year before, only 100,000, but wasn't high to begin with. The year before, 4.3 million. The 2012 year was when the replot occurred. You've seen that already in the assessor's notes, that there was a rail spur in the back, and then they had the old Melrose building, so there was a reconfiguration of the 3 lots into 2. And then the first year was, 2010 was again, a recommendation. And then you see what we as the appellant always put in, and the point here, I know you can't look at the numbers, but I really ask you to look at the consistency. Nothing's changed in this building. It's a special use property. Things don't change. And Again, you're not looking at old decisions, I know that, except for one thing you can look at, nothing's changed. Or should change. That's my presentation, thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Just for the rebuttal, for the recommendation issue, 2018, it was cut, at the board. Was that one, did the city take that one to the municipal board last cycle?
Mr. Chairman, I have a very weird answer, and it might take me 5 minutes to explain it.
Well, if you have an answer, you know.
Say yes or no,
No,
I'll answer.
no, no.
My
It's-
question is
it's
this,
not a
did
yes or-
the city appeal this
It's
to
not
the
a yes
municipal
or
board
no.
last cycle? It's not it's like he says to me, it's a simple question, simple answer, yes or no.
My opinion is it wasn't the city, it was a specific individual who felt he was humiliated.
Again, I'm asking,
at the board.
was there a
Okay, so-
filing to the municipal board?
I think the answer to that
Very
is
simple.
that there was an appeal. Now, how it didn't get there is another factor.
Right.
Exactly, a simple question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, you opened the door, so I'll deal with it in summation.
Next question?
Okay, so we understand we appealed this last cycle to the municipal board. Okay, that's.
The city's appealed it.
Yes, the city's appealed that decision, so again, there's a reason why my recommendation is what it is today, and, you know, it's due to the information I presented in front of you. For your presentation, page 44, income statements examined from your Collier's management expense study. If I wanted to examine these and look through them myself, there would be no way for me to identify these properties, correct?
But you've got them all, these are from income and expense statements.
I know, but
supplied income and
I'm not gonna
expense.
look through, like, I'd have to guess what like, I'm
Uh.
saying, my question is, there's no way for me to analyze this and come back with my own.
You know what,
perspective.
it's not being presented as an argument for anyone to, by mistake, make a change to it, like a child might say, I don't like this, so it doesn't belong. I was thought that what you did, not you, I thought what the assessment department did to the Altus report was foolish and childish, and you can't do that, so I'm not putting myself in that position. But aside from that, until the day we openly exchange all information, we'll give you the data, the numbers, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, and when you worked up these, percentages, did you use a 3-year stabilizer, or did you just take the 1 year?
No, these are every year, and yeah, you're right, they should be stabilized, and we're working on combining them, so we can show every year. That's a good point that someone, you brought it up?
Probably.
No, it was good.
For these properties,
Good, because the reason why is, there's ones in here that are low, like, one of these is 1631 St. Mary's, and I can tell you that, it's the one that popped in at I think, 1.19%. But the next year, they got killed with the turnover. So, that's how to get rid of the outliers, right?
my next question is, for the reported revenue on these properties, did you include market potential rent
Yeah, we use
for the
potential.
vacant space?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so-
we always added in the potential, yeah.
Okay, again, all things.
Well, that's the way our statements are made up too, is they'll subtract the actual vacancy later as an expense.
Yeah, again, but there's no way for me to actually check and see if anything has happened there, correct?
Well, one day when we're getting along better, maybe I don't know when it's gonna happen, I just look forward to it.
Alright, just for your caps, so you spoke to 200 Portage, again, I'm not reporting rebuttal, but this sale, we had this property on appeal, and, there was no lease back in place.
Yes, there was.
It was an empty building
No,
that
it
was
wasn't.
purchased, correct?
No. The day the sale took place, which I believe was April 27th or 28th, 2017, was the same day that leases were written up for the entire building. Some of them were long-term, some were short-term, and they were based on when 24/7 planned on taking over some of the space. In doing this, I spoke to the property manager and to the vendor, who is Bank of Nova Scotia. Bank of Nova Scotia knew agreed to this. What happened is they got the number they wanted, and they stayed in, they needed a place to rent for a while, and it was a true cap rate sale. All the parties had their needs met, and the only thing that was concerning was a rate of return. And after that rate of return, which, yes, was in place for 2 years only, then the owner had plans, different plans for the unit.
Okay. For 423 Main, just 5 properties down here, Class BC on Main Street, you have a 10.06% cap rate. The sale for 9.7 million, that, did you find any odd motivations in the sale, or like any conditions that were unusual?
It was the most scrutinized type of sale you're gonna see in the city of Winnipeg. And it was, a vendor was working very hard to protect his own rights and interests, probably more so than any other deal you would see in the market.
Okay. And so you would agree that the main reason the sale happened is because the Canadian Wheat Board was dissolved to a private company and it was forced to sell the building, correct?
No, they weren't forced to sell it.
How long was this property for sale for the sale?
What's your, it was a length of time that was established under RFP by Public Works and Government Services. They put it out for tender for representation, and they established the parameters under which it's to be sold. Extremely scrutinized sale because it was the federal government. Earlier you asked me a question about if this property was appealed. At the hearing, 2 years ago, when the same question was brought up, the chairman was quite vocal at the person who asked the question, the city assessor. And it was uncomfortable even for me to watch the chairman lash out at this assessor. And as a result, every property in that docket became appealed. So you asked it earlier if that's what happened.
Mr. Newton, that's why this chairman didn't go there.
Well, you know, sometimes people, sometimes
It seems like
personal
there's some
issues.
longing for the old value, though.
Sometimes personal issues come into effect, and it was, whatever, that's what happened. It'll stand up, I'm not concerned.
Okay, again, not what I'm trying to get into, but just,
I
again,
know,
from
but
my eye.
yeah, this question was asked 2 years ago. What, the federal government's motivated to get rid of it? No, they're not motivated. They can let that building sit for 20 years because they're not funded by private money. They're tax money. You know how dumb governments are? They have a process, it's gonna be sold through the process, and that's the way it's gonna be sold. There was a ton of competitive bidding on this property, and more than you would expect, and our company represented one or both parties, I can't recall which one. So our agent's comment on it was that was a very rigorous procedure, more than we'd ever see in private industry.
Thank you for your answer. Again, no more questions for this property, I'd like to move on.
Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions of Mr. Newton?
I have no questions.
I've got one question, I guess. So I'm just wondering, I know the location of this property, pretty good location. I understand the unusual use of it. But shouldn't the cap rate reflect on not only how it's being used, but what else it could be used for?
Well, and that's what I was trying to get to. I don't think the prospects for alternate use are that great because of the custom design of the building. I think it's probably gonna attract a land user in the long run. That and the lot next door, were it to be a change in use, were they to put it on the market. And, you know, we're looking at roughly 8 acres, and the lot next door, I think, is another 3 or 4 acres, so we've got about 11 acres of land. I think it'd attract a very competitive bid on that land as a bulldoze. That would, and another use, land right across the street, which used to be a truck motor repair place, sold to MTS as a switching station, not a switching station, but a telecommunications facility. And I think that sold for $460,000 an acre, and that was 7 or 8 years ago. So that's, and right now, the sugar beet lands, I just saw they're finally putting in the roads. I first appraised that property in 2006, that's when they put their plan together. There's gonna be a change in usage there, and it'll be a mixed use, which will be a multifamily, retail, and some flex. So the asking prices there, I was told, were somewhere around 800,000 per acre. So I think we call it continued gentrification of the southwest area, that will be the interest there. It's a bulldoze, and it does, you know, I'm guessing, you know, the 800 an acre sounds pretty fair, pretty reasonable, and so if you look at my math, you'll think that I think that's predominantly land value.
Of course, you never know what a purchaser's gonna do.
True, but when this building was put up 24 years ago, they were state-of-the-art technology. Now, you know, now it's, times are changing. Every decade brings a brand-new change in land usage. You know, we're tracking the land use in the whole southwest quadrant, and what is interesting is, as when retail moved in, everyone thought retail would continue to multiply, but now there's one of the centers will be closed probably within the next year is our guess, and bulldoze probably go to multifamily, and as things change. So it's just the nature of, you know, internet sales have killed retail, not killed retail, but
Maybe
changed.
Amazon opened up as a distribution center.
Yeah, well, possibly, but we were just joking about this the other day, is that there's always different uses at different generations, and right now, one of the hottest uses are pet stores. And the reason why, because you still can bring your dog in and take it somewhere, right? Whereas everything else you're getting off the internet.
Okay, well, thanks for answering my questions, Mr. Meefield. Consider that, and we'll go on to the next one now, which is 1080 Woodley Street.
I had one
Oh, that's all right.
closing comment,
Oh, you make that closing comment.
and it's, I've been working in this field since only about '96, and that came on the tail end of the Scurfield report. And one of the things that concerned me as a citizen, and I'm gonna be way off base here, but someone has to say this, is that the incidents that brought about the Scurfield report were deemed to be an error by the assessment department. And the courts ordered a reassessment. I heard the number was something like $50 million it cost the city. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but you know, I think that the city's made a gross error on the non-recoverables. And as a citizen, they're in a far safer position if they were to lose this case now on the 5% than win. Because if they win, any sort, and we all know this is eventually going to go to the municipal board and possibly the courts.
You know, I don't think we need this now, but I'm interested in what you're gonna say, so. if you-
Yeah, I know you would. Well, the concern here is, not if, but when the city loses in court, as they generally do, there'll be repayment ordered. And it'll go back in time, and it'll include the school division's money. My rough estimation is that commercial taxes, that the 5% represents about $30 million a year. So the city could be faced with a bill. You know, they're safer to lose. Sometimes by winning you lose, sometimes by losing you win. And for them, I suggest that right now they should try to lose the 5%. And if they would like to appeal it, that's fine. Maybe they can win it later, but at least the citizens won't be faced with a massive, and tell me how does that something get classified as class action? Is that simple in Canada?
Not that easy. Anyway, the suggestion is then that we should, in favor of the city, find for you and give you the 5% because we do the city a favor. That's your final summation, I
Well,
suppose.
Us taxpayers a favor.
Well,
Wouldn't it be better if they had a windfall than if the case is heard 3-4 years from now, it's $100 million.
You know what, it's upset about Ralph, Mr. Meefield, anyway, so.
I don't know if anyone's brought it up, but it bothers me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, as I said, we're gonna now proceed, unless you have a comment you wanna make in response to Mr.
I'll let
Meefield.
him finish it now.
Okay, so we're gonna deal with 1080 Whippley Street. When you're ready.
Sounds good. Roll number 0307155340. We're looking at 1080 Waverly Street, this is on the corner of Seal Avenue and Waverly. The 2020 assessment is $10,250,000. Again, we have a actual year built on this building of 1989. There are two buildings on this roll number, as you can see on my page 2. We have a gross floor area across both buildings of 55,517 and a leasable area of 52,900. If you look at my page 2, you can see we have two buildings. Page 2, I've included at the bottom there a picture of 1090 Waverly. Page 3, you can see 1080 Waverly, the longer strip style single story OFS, and the second building is a 2-story OFS. Page 4, you can see our request for information are always received. Page 5, we have an income approach workup of this property. Again, many different sized units, working up to a total square footage of 52,980, and we have a blended rate across this property of $14.41 a square foot. We have our standard OFS parameters for this property, so it's a 5.5% vacancy, a 2% non-recoverable expense, shortfall at $7 for that vacancy, and an overall OFS cap rate of 6.7% for this property. That works out to a total value of $10,250,000. If you look at page 6, I've tried to include some good net rents on the Waverly and Taylor area, which I again find most comparable for this property. My first two comparables are 1,000 and 1,150 Waverly, very close by. This is an OFS built in 1966 and in 1971. They are one floor. The leases are signed early 2017, so getting close to our reference date, or closer to our reference date. They're 1 and 3 year leases at $14.50 to $14, and these are a good range of square footage here. 16,000 square foot for the first unit, which is similar to one of the biggest premises on our property at about 14,500, and then you have a 5,000 square foot unit at $14. Excuse me. I've also included, again, some of my rents on this page are newer. We have a 1250 Waverly built 2005. It's having a rent for 4,800 square feet. You're looking at $16 a square foot, and another 2000 built 865 Waverly. This is main floor, more medical space. It's a dentist space for doing surgery, and it's at $17.07 a square foot. Our subject property is at $14.41 a square foot. The 15 comparables I've presented today in the area work up to an average of $15.45 with a weighted average of $14.80 and a median of $16. Page 7 is that income report workup again. Page 8, I won't go over that again, but we're at that 6.7% OFS cap rate on this one, and again, it's within all ranges of within our City of Winnipeg parameters, and then out of CBRE and Cushman Wakefield. If you turn to page 10, I've included the income and expense mailer presented for this property. Page 12, you can see the total office rent. You can see the expenses, repair and maintenance. Again, if you turn to page 16, you can see the rent roll for this property. There are net rents in place here for the different units. You can see the range of rents on this property. Right, we have $11, $10, $14.50, $13, $13.80, $12. $14, $13, you can see up to $16. And the reported annual commercial rent on page 18 at the end of that rent roll is $12.93 with an area leased of 26,666 and 0 vacant space in the building, so it's fully occupied. And then page 19 is for the other building. And we have, again, rent ranging in the building from $13.17 for net up to $20.90. And you can see on the end of page 20 there, for the space on that building, we have an annual rental of $17.45, which an area lease of 28,017 square feet with 0 acres. And I've included my same agenda, but I went over in the last hearing. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. That is my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, any questions?
Yeah, so did you look at the actual statement and compare that to your workup?
Yes, I looked at the actual statement.
And what was your comparison?
What was my comparison?
Sorry, I should ask, firstly, that this was all done by the model?
Yes, it's all model runs.
Okay. And how did that compare?
How did that compare?
Right.
Like you mean like reported NOI to like what our model NOI was? Or what
That's
you
correct,
asking?
that's correct.
So you wanna know? I saw that they had a 1 million, if you look at page 12, they had a total revenue of 1,153,906.
Right.
After they had 26,000 in cleaning expenses, 41,000 total repairs and maintenance. Their utilities were 81,422. They reported maintenance outside of 32,000 with a total operating cost of 182,000. After administration and other expenses, which includes 420,000 to cash to owner, mortgage interest of 14,000, asset fee of 30,000. They reported a total expense of 893,000 on the killer. And they reported an NOI with the way they presented of 260,000.
Right. I can read that as well. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if you went through it all. Obviously, there's some items that don't belong, which would be mortgage interest, cash to owner on the expense side, and on the income side, previous year's CAM recovery.
I did not comb it with a fine tooth, but I did reference and look at it as I put it in.
Okay. And in your capitalization rate, where does this belong? Where do you slot this?
OFS. Suburban office.
Okay. Now did you inspect?
I've never been in this building.
Oh, okay, so, but you are aware that, you mentioned earlier that there's two buildings here, right?
Yes.
And I believe I was referring it to earlier, that one building is an office building, one with the second floor,
Yes.
and the other one is a Flux warehouse building.
Again, whatever you wanna call it, yes.
So it has a warehouse, industrial usage in it.
There's a mixed range of properties there, from chiropractic to, you know, there's a wide range of use of tenants in this building.
So does the OFS take that into account?
Does the OFS take into the mix of uses?
Yeah, the industrial usage.
It is drawing, the rents are being drawn from other OFS's net rents, like, again, these are, what I would have is, these are reported as net rents in the property. So it's taking into account any kind of net rents, whatever different uses are in OFS buildings across the city.
In regard to the non-recoverables, on page 12, you can see that there's two items recovered, the common area and the tax,
Yes.
approximately $313,000. Did you look and see what the expenses were to balance, on the other side of the balance sheet on that?
Let's look, I don't remember offhand. So you wanna know what the actual tax expenses were on
Well,
the
I'm wondering
property?
if you calculated the shortfall.
No, I did not calculate the shortfall.
Okay.
There's.
So I was just stalling for time while I worked it out.
Pardon?
I was just stalling for time while I worked it out. So then, the range, the cap rate applied then was 6.7, although your range in between your 20th and your 80th does indicate it could, you could go, what, as high as 7.3?
There are OFSs with 7.3% cap rate.
Yeah, and your max is 9.05 in your study?
Yes.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions to this?
I have no questions.
No questions, then I don't have any questions, so Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed.
Thank you. Sorry, just 1 second, I just wanted to double check something. we were looking at the actual income from the property, and there was an error here in the original calculation that I picked up. I don't know how it happened. But the actual income would be higher. And I was just trying to quickly calculate that. But it requires me going backwards and forwards.
So you're talking about on page 1 of your report where you're doing your work?
Right. I didn't do this workup,
Okay.
but I'm just reading it now.
Well,
and
okay,
there's-
I'm gonna suggest that if you need time to get the proper number, I think it's essential for this, I think we should maybe adjourn for 5 minutes and let you work it out.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, Mr. Neufeld, we can proceed, and I guess you made your correction, you can let us
Yeah,
know
I-
what it is. and
I
that.
think what happened was the person who read this, read the budget line instead of the actual line.
So what change did you make on page 1?
Okay, so we'll start off with, or potential income is not 624, it's 749,563. And what that's comprised of is on page 12 and 13 of the statement, and I think we have it as well, but I was looking at this one. Pretty much, a simple way of doing this is go down to the bottom of the page where it says net income of 260 and add back in cash to owner mortgage interest, add back in the asset fee, add back in leasing commissions, add back in the tenant improvements.
What page are you on?
Your 13?
Hang on, there's a few 13s maybe.
Well, this is what our 13 looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was looking at the assessor's, sorry,
Oh.
I had scribbled on his already. so-
Assessors.
It's my page, 2, 3, and 4, it's the same. I started working on it earlier. But the budget, the actual year-to-date was 260, and I just added back in to show the potential income, the cash to owner, the mortgage interest, I'm going from the bottom up. Added back in the asset fee, added back in the tenant improvements, added back in leasing commissions. And that should be 749,563. That's the potential income. 5.5% vacancy turns to 708,337. I used 5% and 2%, and then shortfall remained the same. So my net income was 637,700 even, 637,700. And just to point out that the deductions for 5% and 2% were about $50,000, a couple of dollars underneath that. The actual non-recoverable in this property was $146,009, which is 12.7%. That's the actual non-recoverable, 12.7%, and we're putting in at 7%. Well, actually, not 12.7. Did that the wrong number. That should be on 749. So it's about 20%. Sorry, the actual non-recoverables. So anyway, our NOI is 637,700. Capitalization rate is not 8.5. I put it at 8%, and our value is 7,971,255, rounded to 7,971. And so I'm using actual income and an 8% capitalization rate, and the 8% holds up well with the comparables we've provided you, which are a mix of of different uses, including the two I mentioned earlier, three I mentioned earlier, as well as some of the strip malls. This is, there are three types of users. There's the retail users. Second floor of the building, there's an office user, and the industrial, or the warehouse building is, a lot of it's been gentrified, but by coincidence, I was in one of the so-called offices in the industrial building, and the back of it was still all open and unfinished, and the tenant was using the front of it for his own purpose and renting the back space out for storage to another party as a sublease. So it is what it is. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Oh. I said everything from the last one. I don't want me to repeat it all, do you?
We remember.
That's it. Okay. Any
Actual
questions?
income.
Just a couple. So for your new revised rent, that works out to $749, $563 works out to $13.70 a square foot.
I didn't do that calculation.
No problem. I just want to show everything right.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're using the actual rent in place,
Right.
what they're receiving, and then for vacancy 5.5%.
Well, now, just, yeah, but, some of these rents, I'm not disputing, the numbers here, some of these are semi-gross. That's what caused the error in the calculation, is that you can see that some of them are reported up. The range here, I'm looking at quick glance, $13 and $16 and $12.11. But the semi-gross one is the second floor office. Is the big loser, I mean, the big one.
It's
that-
$20.
It's 20 gross, yeah.
Okay, and then so for vacancy, you're using our standard 5.5%?
Yes, there was a big vacancy problem last year, but not this year, so it seems reasonable.
The vacancy as of reference date is 0, correct?
That's a little strange. Why am I looking at a tenant that's reported moved in 2010? When this was provided in 2018. You know, it says 0 here.
Okay.
I just noticed that.
That's all my questions on this one, thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Smith, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, so just to get clear, Mr. Neufeld, you're saying that you've got a potential rent of $749,563?
Correct.
So really, it's almost the same as what the city has.
Oh, well, that'd probably be an accident.
I mean, it's a little bit lower, but not significantly.
Well, true,
If you're-
on potential rent,
And
it's.
you're using
close.
actuals, they're using the model.
Right, yeah. Actually, I'm not using actuals for net income, because the net income on the actuals would be about $98,000 lower because of the non-recoverables. So the actual NOI would be, a difference would be, oh, I see what they did. Never mind, it wasn't an error from last year, it was, they were trying to calculate all the non-recoverables instead of, when the person who did it, instead of the rates established. Because non-recoverables vary by statement year to statement year. So we used the stabilized 7% rather than the actual 20, and now I see what the person who did this did, yeah. They took, so the actual NOI in this reference here real income, real money, was the $527,000, as stated here. When you stabilize it and use 5 and 2 instead of 20% non-recoverables, it's 637,700, as I've stated. So that's a $50,000 difference from the assessor.
Correct, yeah, you've got an NOI for $50,000.
Yeah,
Assessment.
and it's, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next property is 306 Central Boulevard. And you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're looking at roll number 0306516340036 Scarborough Boulevard. We have a 2020 assessment of $1,738,000. This is a one-story building directly to the west of the first Shaw building we had on the docket today. Shaw Cable Systems Limited also owns this property as well. It was actually built in 1988 and has a gross floor area and a leasable square footage of 9,720 square feet. If you look at my page 2, you can see where the property is. You can see it's a smaller single-story building. Single-story building, sorry. If you look at another picture on page 3. Page 4, they've always complied with our request for information. We've received both mailers in the last 2 years. There's a sale February 1st, 2013 for $2,008,000, but again, I had no further information on it, so I didn't really wait on that sale. Page 5, this is our model generated rent of $13.35 per square foot, 9,720 square feet. Our standard OFS parameters, again, 5.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, $7 shortfall. 6.7% cap rate on this one for that total value of $1,738,000. Turn the page. I've included some comparables on this page. We're getting smaller sized onto Skirfield now, so I've included some OFS comparables on Skirfield itself, on Dovercourt, Chevrier, kind of in a more of an industrial area off of Waverly. And then I've also went so far as, some of these buildings we're getting into it today, as we've spoken about, are more into the flex warehouse space, where it's office as well as, open warehouse in the back for storage or loading or shipping or what you want to use that space for. I have included some flex warehouse space. You can see my comparables from 11 to 16 are flex warehouse spaces rents on Skirfield and Wilkes there. So you can see between all of these rental rates, I have an average of $14.62, $14.39 weighted average, and a $15 median. Our subject is at $13.35. Page 7 is just the completed income workup as well. Page 8, we're at that 6.7% cap rate again on our chart. I'm not going to get into it again. Lower at 6.7, which is within our standard parameters for OFSs. Page 10, this is filled out exactly the same as the other Shaw space. It's owner occupied. Reported some expenses, and then with no income because it's owner occupied. If you have any questions about this property, please let me know. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Newcomb?
Did you inspect?
I have not been in this building.
And was the valuation, was this all done by the model?
All done by the model.
As an OFS?
As an OFS, yeah, standard office.
There was some work done on the property after purchase, and I'm just looking to see if the permit has been provided. Do you have a copy of that?
No, I didn't see a permit or look at a renovation done.
I was just looking for it. Again, same question as the last property. If in the event you found out that it wasn't an office, it was something different, would the value differ?
Depending on the characteristics of that property, the rent could be different based on the size or the age or the, you know, definitely could be a different value.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Representative?
No questions.
I noticed in this one, there was a sale for, in February 2013 for higher than the assessed value, but you said that you don't know anything about that sale.
Nothing filled out, there wasn't a sales questionnaire, it was a sale, you know, Shaw bought the building from next door from my understanding. That's, I just didn't have anything else to,
It's possible it's not market anyway, they might have wanted it because it's adjacent to where they are now.
could be.
To motivate purchasers perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld?
Sorry, just one second again, I just wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about. Some days. The property was expansion for Shaw next door, and the use reported to me at the time was dispatch and coordinating a location for the people who are doing home service on Shaw boxes. So I don't think it was an office, it's a dispatch would be the best word for it. There's no category. I take it in the assessor's workup, it would be more of an industrial use, much like the building itself. And from time to time, they do repurpose their buildings. So when we first looked at it, and I inspected it back a year after purchase, when they were cleaning up the old office fixtures and setting it up for their use, that's what it was. And I honestly haven't been in there since. And it could have changed its use with Shaw's changing system. We use the same rental rate as the main building. Some consideration has been given to asking for a merge of their three properties. We're actually, I think Shaw is open to it, but it has to do with timing, because we don't want to be in the area where supplementals are going to be issued, or there'd be a change in the role. It would be a planned merging. So it's on the table, but the point is, it is the same economic unit. We've used the same rates, and $11.25 a square foot based on the same rent comparables we discussed earlier on not office space, but a mixed usage, and same parameters, and the same cap at 8.25. That value comes to $1,120,000, which is fairly close to what the previous year's assessment was. And last year's decision was based on a capitalization rate of 7.5 and the applicant's net operating income. And we were both there.
Oh, yeah.
So, we didn't appeal, nobody appealed that decision. There's been no movement in the caps except to go up, not down. That's what our study will show you. Across the universe, cap rates have increased, not decreased. Pages 19 and 20, you can see that in selected categories, the rates have increased. As a mixed-use property, and remember again, we don't track properties like this because this isn't an investment style property. But there's something in appraisal called the elasticity of pricing. So as rates get more aggressive and prices increase, the poor properties, the worst properties, increase in value more so than the good properties, because they're a better alternative. As the market decreases, goes down, the inferior properties decrease at a greater rate. And that's what we're facing now, price elasticity on a property like this. And that's why we think it should be lower than the previous year. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of,
Just a couple of questions. So, you made an explanation before, and I think I understood it. You're using the same rent as the building beside you because you treating them all as one economic unit, the parking
Correct.
lot, the building, and this one. So,
And they alternate their usages.
so so usually a smaller property, all else held equal, will have a higher rent than like, economies of scale, I'm saying, is a true thing, correct?
Yeah, I mean, generally, but there's exceptions to the rule, like if you're assembling a property and you're gonna pay more, like, you know, when you put up the hydro building, you had to buy a whole bunch of properties and demolish them, so you're paying more. We tend to go greenfield versus brownfield, because everybody likes to have these clever little catchphrases. Greenfield, yes, economy of scale; brownfield, no.
And so if this property were to sell on its own as, you know, whatever the building is now, you're saying this, the 1125 for the 90,000 square feet should be the same as the 1125 for the 9,000 square feet?
I think that this property is a better prospect for sale than the main property, because it is on its own title. I agree with you there. However, Scurfield's time is, I don't know, call it past, but the conversions that have happened on Scurfield have generally been from an inferior building to an improvement to a better building. Like when the egg hatchery closed, they spent some money, and now it's an auto body shop, which is actually an improvement in highest best use. And that's what we've been seeing on Scurfield. Since this property is already at the upper end of the scale for what the market there can demonstrate, I don't think that there's a big upside. A great example is also the C&T rental site, which has been on the market for, I guess now 2 years, and 3 failed sales. So I think, you know, if there's people looking for land, and that's a fair comment, that the land is always of importance. I don't think repurposing the building is the top of anyone's awareness. Better than the other building, true. Which is why I was sort of going, ooh, 7.5 instead of 8. Yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. But, and I haven't calculated that out, but a reasonable person should consider a slightly less, slightly more aggressive rate.
Okay. And then that would be the same for the cap rate, slightly lower?
Well, that's
cap
what I
rate?
meant, that's
Yeah.
what I meant, just
Okay.
the cap. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I was just quickly glanced at last year's decision, and I feel pretty strongly about the big building is gonna be difficult to repurpose. This one is a bit better. So if the other one was at 8, I was looking at 8 and a quarter, I believe, that, yeah, I could see this one should be a bit lower than that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that's all.
Thank you.
Not 6. That's ridiculous.
Mr. McIntyre, any questions of the applicant?
No questions.
Mr. Lindhurst? So, Mr. Dufeld, this year you're basically asking for a $50,000 lower assessed value than the last value
Right.
was 2 years ago.
Yeah. And that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me, the assessor had a very good question. It should be more competitive than to Scurfield. And,
Yeah, but that's the question I asked you. I asked you,
Yeah.
in fact, you are asking for $50,000 less than the last assessment.
on paper, yeah,
Yep.
but upon the serious cross-examination, I think that I would probably soften that cap up a bit.
Okay, yeah, because I also noticed that you have some work up and it says optimal cap rate, somewhere between 7.5 and 8.24, and you put it down 8.25, which is higher than, it's the highest point, it's actually higher than your highest.
Well,
So I'm just wondering why you do these numbers, because, you know, it
So
seems
the
to be.
way we work this out is what we're trying to do with our people is get them trained to be more objective in the selection of cap and looking at these criteria. And we go where it leads us. Then when you actually come into it and then you look at it, you have to make a judgment call. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have been going on here.
No, it shouldn't.
So I would concur that 8.25 is on the high side.
Okay,
It would soften it by a quarter point, maybe half a point, in that ballpark.
okay. And anything you had to say about the consideration when it was purchased by Shaw?
Oh, it was an assemblage sale. They wanted the land, they had to expand, and,
You know if they're competitive bids?
no, it was an unsolicited sale.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, let's do item number 4, which is 100 Smithville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alright, roll number 03065157700. We're looking at 100 Sturfield Boulevard. 2020 assessment is $4,139,000. Again, this is a property that has 2 buildings on the roll number. Built in 1988, the one building, and the other building was built in 2006. We have effective years of 1994 on that original 1988 building and 2006 on the 2006 building. This is a gross floor area of 17,986 and a leasable area of 17,986. If you look at page 2, you can see pictures of the properties from the aerial view. Both buildings, you can see a street view on the bottom of page number 2. And another street view on page 3. Page 4, we have, they've always complied with our request for information, and I just put a little information about the leases that are in place, but you can see them directly on page 11 once we get there. Page 5, across the 2 buildings, we have 17,986 square feet, and so the main building, the original building is at 13,006 square feet at a model generated rate of $16.12, and then the smaller units in the new building built in 2006 get the rates of $19.46 and $19.60. This works out to a blended rate across both buildings of $17.06. Again, we're following our standard OFS parameters of 5.5% vacancy loss, 2% expenses, $7 shortfall, and a 6.7% cap rate. This works out to a total value of $4,139,000. Page 6, I'm using the same comparables as the last property. I presented OFS ones for the first 10 comparables, and then I've also included some flex warehouse space to represent the other types of what I find to be the 2 kind of main buildings in this area. We have an average of $14.62, which is below our rates across the properties. Again, the smaller size of the suites, along with that 2006 build for a newer effective year, increases those rents in our model. So that's why you're getting the higher rents on the smaller spaces as to the main floor space. And also why some of these rents can be above what I'm showing as an average across all these buildings that are built from 1993 up until 2008 at the very bottom there. And you can see that my newest flex warehouse space at the very bottom in 2008 has a rate, we signed in early 2017, I believe, like $19 a square foot. So there are higher rents out there. Page 7 is the income workup for this property. Page 8 is our standard capitalization rate sheet. We're doing that same cap rate as the other OFSs at 6.7%. Page 10 is the online entry for the income and expense mailer. So you can see this owner has filled out net income rents. He's put a total rental income of $285,319 for base rent received. And then you can see down bottom left, there are the general administrative recoveries, utility maintenance recoveries, and property tax recoveries, which gives them a total income if you minus the interest. There's also an interest income in between there, which we wouldn't include. Total income of this property is $413,000 approximately. Again, if you add up their expenses, you get across their general admin, you're looking at about $26,000 in expenses. Utilities and maintenance is approximately, do you have this one added up minus? But the total expenses work out to approximately $140,000 without the promotions and the market interest, And so, the reported NOI of 219,000 with those, and without those, NOI, which I consider, with those taken out, would be 200, or approximately 270,000. If you look at our, income approach to value, we have an NOI of approximately 277,000 on this property. So, if you have any questions on that, please let me know. You can see the rental rates in place on page 11. And, again, like I said, on page 4, I worked those out. So there's actually rents in place for, unit 1 of $15.50 across that 13,000 square feet. And then, unit 2 has a 5-year lease for $16 a square foot, and unit 3 has a 12-year lease for $21.75 a square foot. That's what's reported by the owners. If you have any other questions on this property, please let me know.
Thank you. Chief, are there any questions?
Yes, you made a statement that you thought the NOI was 270,000.
Approximately.
That's without vacancy, right?
That is no vacancy, because everything's, from my understanding, there's no vacancy.
So you still have to take vacancy off that, right?
You could add a shortfall, yes.
And a vacancy
And
risk.
a market vacancy, yeah, but
Okay.
again, when I see 0 vacancy.
Yeah, so it's not exactly what your model is saying, it's lower than your model is saying.
When I'm looking at actuals for this year, the one reported, that's the NO I'm getting, because there is 0 vacancy. But if you were adding a model vacancy, you would add 5.5, and you could add shortfall to that, but I'm just showing them they're actually reporting.
Right, now, as a matter of fact, they said here that their income was 285,000 potential income, and you're at 307,000.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
just as long as we're talking about the same thing.
No, I'm just saying the NOI I'm coming to and what it is on our model coming to.
And did you have the opportunity, since you did mention some numbers, to calculate their recoveries versus their costs?
Yes, well, I did look at them, so
So
they are short on some of them.
Yeah, so the
Right.
recoveries I get are about 127,829. Those are the 3 recoveries.
Yeah, I have, one second, I just wanna make sure I have the right one. $127,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah, okay, and then their expenses. I just want to double check, take off that mortgage interest, obviously. I'm getting 142,562.
I get 140 if I don't add mortgage interest and promotions.
Oh, you took promotions out?
Yeah, so 1,800, but we're,
Okay, well, let's disagree on promotions.
for sure, it's, again, in general.
Yeah, but obviously mortgage interest doesn't belong.
No.
Okay. So, the shortfall in this particular case on recoveries, my number would be 14,733, and yours is gonna be roughly
Yeah.
12,900. Which, is more than 2%, is it not?
On this property, yeah, this one mailer, the way they reported it, there's a difference of more than 2%.
It's, as a matter of fact, my calculation, it's, 5.2%.
Yeah, not unheard of for
Okay.
that this year,
Just-
1 year for sure.
All right, no problem there, just make sure we're same page. And, but page 5 is the model?
Page 5 is the model generated, yeah.
And, the buildings on it, the second, any chance, sorry, have you ever inspected this site?
I've never been in the building.
Okay. So the building on the, west side has got a warehouse portion at the back?
Okay.
Have you been in there? No,
I've
I guess
never
not.
been, no.
Okay. Well, I'm just kind of wondering here, because we've had, I guess every building so far we've talked about has been classed as an OFS with a standardized OFS standard. But I've been in other hearings where the assessor has taken and done multiple revenue streams when he had the information. And they would take, here's my revenue stream for office, here's my revenue stream for industrial. And so what generally happens in your parameters is then the rent drops on the industrial. Shortfall and vacancy are lower because shortfall is less, right? And then cap rates, who knows, can be different depending on who it is, but generally some consistency there. But would not that process have been more reasonable to apply on this one plus the other ones that we've discussed where there is an industrial nature?
When a property is put on the roll, again, if it's seen that, say, it's a flex warehouse space, and it's mostly flex warehouse, the person putting it on will put it on as flex warehouse. If this one was reviewed and we went in and we considered it not office, like, you could add it as flex warehouse if it was pure flex warehouse space. When this one was put on, and the way it is with, let me just see there. We have, I guess the one building's Arthur Gallagher Auto Pack, so it's offices, and then the other one might have some warehouse space, but again, I've tried to include flex warehouse and show what it goes for in the area, just to represent that, oh, the one building might have some open warehouse in the back. And this is what it goes for, it's
Right,
the
but-
rent, I don't know if they're gonna change that much.
Yeah, but your page 5 doesn't show a difference in the rates on the basis of flex warehouse.
No,
does it?
again, yeah, again.
There, you've got the other spaces at $19.
Yep.
That's not flex warehouse rent rates, are they?
Again, I've just included a range of flex warehouse spaces on Skurfield, but, again, $19 might be above standard average flex warehouse space, I do not disagree with that.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions to the assessor?
No questions.
Mr. Lyndhurst? I don't either.
Again, I noticed an error in the calculation.
Can I fix that one yet?
I already did. It was easier to figure out.
Okay, let's proceed then. Just direct us to what you changed.
Yes, potential income is 285,319. Now, going through and putting in 5.5% vacancy, 5% non-recoverables, 2% replacement reserve, plus $7 shortfall, my NOI is now 243,736. And as discussed earlier, I think the capitalization rate would be slightly more favorable than this. I've capitalized it at 8%, which is a value of $3,046,695. That's 3,046,695, rounded to 3,047. And I have inspected this property, and it does contain an industrial space to the rear. And what it's just a little bit interesting is if you walk across the street to 119 Skurfield, which is a strip mall, it's got 4 revenue streams in it. It's got 2 different, one restaurant, one fast food, one car wash, and one retail strip. So it's all broken down into different revenue streams. And I think if you're gonna do that sort of thing, you gotta do it with all the properties. And on that basis, you would pick up the rent differentials. And so, anyway, that was based on actual income, and you've already heard me say that the non-recoverables are 5.2%. So it's actual income, 8%.
Any questions?
Just a couple, just regarding the non-recovery, so have you ever seen a property where, like in this year, they did not cover their completely, like we'll say, sorry, I'm gonna rephrase this. They did not recover all their expenses that they were, recovering here. Have you ever seen on mailers where the next year, or like some years they've over-recovered, some years they've under-recovered, and they make up for it the next year? And sometimes it can be important to look at 3 years to see what they're recovering over 3 years, because sometimes they have to adjust year to year.
Well, where that will happen is on the year-end adjustments, because sometimes all the expenses don't come in, or invoices or refunds don't come in. The last property, I don't know if you noticed it, but there was a prior year cam recovery
Yeah,
of $15,000. And yeah, I think that's worth looking at. I can tell you though, that our shortfall this year on this property was 14,733. 2 years ago, it was 149,886.
Okay.
So, had we stabilized a longer term, the shortfall would be higher. The industry standard, as I said, is 7%. That Collier's management, Collier's brokerage, Collier's appraisal, we use that. I thought the assessment department was on the same page as us.
That's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions of Mr. Neufeld?
No questions.
Ms. Lewis, no? I don't need that, thank you. Yeah, next property is at 1479 Buffalo Place. And when you're ready, you can proceed. Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, crap. I have that file, I just noticed I don't have the next file.
Oh.
30 seconds, is that fine?
We'll give you 30 seconds to get the file done. Absolutely, go ahead.
I have a file for Dougal, and I'm wondering why I have a file for Dougal here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
Should I continue, Mr. Chair?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roll number 030715730000, 1479 Buffalo Place. We have a 2020 assessed value of $5,295,000. This is a one-story building built in 1968 with an effective year of 1970. We have a gross floor area of 38,558 with a leasable area of 35,066. You can see on page 2, we have a street view and aerial picture of the property with the parking lot at the rear. And this is on Buffalo Place, which is off of Waverly, and similar area we've been talking to all day. We have a request for information on page 3. They've always complied with our request. We have a dated sale, 2009, 3.4 million, sworn for 3.4 million. Page 4, we have our income workup for this property. So we have a total square footage of 35,066 square foot. This is a blended rate of $12.15. So you can see under my premises and tenant class that the first premise is C2 standard office of 15,600 square feet. This is main floor office. And then you can see my next two units are office / basement leasable. So this is basement space. The fourth pit is 7,200 square feet. So this is the remaining main floor at $12.24. And then the rest of the pits are, again, basement space units. So this property has main floor units for lease and basement units. The main floor is 22,800 square feet. And then the basement space from our model is 12,266 square feet. And if you want to look at it this way, the main floor is a blended rate of $14.72, and the basement is a blended rate of $7.38. The vacancy, we're following standard OFS parameters on this property, so we have 5.5%. We have 2% expenses, and we have 7.2% cap rate. Again, so our standard cap rate kind of today has been 6.7%. You've seen with the age of the building, this building's a little older, built in 1970, so it's kind of, we're getting the cap rate of a higher by 5.5%, it's at 7.2. This works up to a total value of $5,295,000. Again, okay, so I have included standard OFS comparables on page 5. We have 30 office space comparables. This is for that main floor space we're talking about. So you can see rents across the city, but the majority of them are kind of on Waverly, Taylor, that area of the city. You can see the average is $15.16, and the weighted average is $14.73. You can see comp 15 is actually the property, so you can, again, it's the subject lease in the property. It was included on my OFS list, but comp 15 is the subject, so just so that's clear. Page 6, I've included basement rents, that leasable basement space. And you can see from comp 10 to 14, I tried to have it highlighted, hopefully it came through, but those are subject leases in the building for basement space. So again, we have actual basement lease comparables at 1,700 nest or comp 1 and 2, that's from 650 to 890 for small units. You can see 1483 Pembina. This is more of a bi-level basement where you walk down, it has, it's just a bi-level building. Our building we're looking at today is more of a pure basement. You go downstairs, you're in the basement, it has units. 1483 Pembina ranges from $8 to $9 for very small unit basement space. 226 Osborne has 3 basement leases that are net from $660 up to $11. And then our subject leases in place are from $925 up to $1175 for different size units. And then 865 Waverly, which is, built in 2000, much newer than our building, nicer comparable, and it's at that $12 a square foot for basement space. So you can see our average across net leases for basement space is $923 with a weighted average of $1051 and a median of $9. Our basement space is at a blended rate of $7.38. You just turn through again, page 8, I won't go through the capitalization rate sheet again, but we're at 7.2%. If you turn to page 10, this is the start of our income and expense mailer. We roll through. So page 12, you can start to see the rents that are actually in place for this building. So these subject leases were copied from the sheet. You can see the range of rents. They are net, except you can see unit 103A is $18. That's a gross lease. But you can see the other units are recovering Canada property tax and management along with their base rent. And then page 13 is the two larger main floor units. You can see Claims Pro Inc. is in that 15,600 square foot lease on page 13, and they're paying $16.60 a square foot. And then you can see PCL Construction is in that 7,200 square foot unit, and they're paying $9.75 a square foot. And they're also recovering management Canada property tax. And then page 13, page 14 is the actual annual statement. You can see the breakdown of what actually all their income and expenses are. And then yeah, 17 is just my included agenda again, but that is my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, questions?
Have you inspected this property?
I have not been in personally yet.
And was this evaluation, page 4, all done on the model?
It's all model driven.
And you were mentioning basement leasable, and you were talking about some comparisons. Have you actually been in your comparables?
No, I haven't, but I spoke with an assessor who was in there.
Well, you're using split level, bi-level basements and comparing them to full basement. Were you aware of that?
I tried to explain which of my comparables were bi-levels, and then I said how the subject is not a bi-level, and I said how it's a full basement.
Perhaps I missed that.
Yeah, I think you did.
Maybe I want it to be said again.
It's fine. I am aware though.
When you went through the rent roll, I didn't hear you point out that several of these rents are actually gross rents, correct?
I did point out the gross rent that I saw on page, I missed Tiger Claw, you're right, but I said unit 103A was definitely a gross lease.
Right.
So, I see
Okay.
2 gross, and then I
Okay.
pointed 1 out.
Those are my questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions of the assessor?
No questions.
Ms. Billinghurst? And I don't have any either, so I'm assuming you don't.
No changes. Just
Oh,
had to
good.
I had to double check that all. So we're working with the actual income, and it is a semi-gross, several units are semi-gross, and some are net rents. This, in cases like that, the statement is the best indicator of value. The income, I just want to, sorry, I just noticed a slightly different number here. Maybe I didn't. Okay. Okay, never mind, I figured it out. The net income as full is 416, or sorry, 415,733. Now, the statements on base rent, gross potential say 432,288, but that's because there are some units that are gross rents, and that would be put in the rental revenue number. The actual expenses, and this statement is a Collier's statement, so that's why it was easier to understand, at least for us. Actual expenses, 338,968, leaving a income of 415,733 as full. The building has been impacted by vacancy its entire life that I've been involved with it, and the reason is that it was an industrial building, and it was built as such, and then there's now three freestanding buildings on the site. One was converted with some office space. Then there's another one that's outside that I believe is still industrial, and then there was a new flex warehouse built on the side from Fennel. And that's why there's a big difference in the rents, because the Fennel units are commanding higher rents, and there's a site on the property, just looking for it. There's some low rents for the industrial portions, and then higher rents for office. The chronic problem has always been the basement space and the second floor space in the converted building that's in office use. Going back over time, if you look at the recent statement, the way to look at this expense is on a gross basis is looking at the $84,000 vacancy and free rent and comparing that against potential income. Now, it's approximately, on the gross amount, it's about 12%, and that's what we've applied. Oh, I'm sorry, no, we've applied 12% on the net, but it's 12% on the gross. So it's really the difference between recoveries and nets. So we have used 12%, which is on the net, rather than 5.5. That's the difference. The second difference on with us and the assessor is that we do have a higher vacancy problem. The NOI, after working through all the numbers we're using, is 310.77, and the actual net income on this statement is 331. And that includes some non-recoverables. The non-recoverable calculation is 6.3% on this basis. So just again, another indication that non-recoverables impact every property that's in the rental market for this particular year. Previous years were much, much higher. And the reason it's dropped is because the new buildings have come on stream and they're a better revenue source than the old buildings. The previous, we're capping this at 8.5%, and that's there's no change there because what this building is. It's an old building that was repurposed, and then other buildings were placed on the site, and it's overdeveloped at this point in time. It's part of the Pollard banknote buildings, and he's got 3 buildings there. Of course, when they were first built, they were making lottery tickets, printing money for other countries, that sort of thing, and that is not a business that they're doing anymore, at least on this site. And so it was just repurposing the usage to other, trying to fulfill other parts of the market. The vacancies are, as I mentioned, the second floor and the basement. Generally, it's been a charitable institution taking the top floor space because it was cheaper, and they're hard to keep in your building. Previous year's assessment is $3,491,000. 2016, it's actually $4,549,000, and that's under appeal. There was a miscalculation on part of the assessment department, and that hasn't been heard yet, but last year was $3,491,000. So this year we're looking for $3,648,000, which is a nominal increase, and the only reason we feel an increase is warranted is not because of market parameters, it's just the vacancy is a little bit lower than last year. So a slightly better year. Last year it was a 15% vacancy, and now it's at 12%, and that's what we're dealing with in this building. Historical vacancy has ranged. Previous year to that was 22%, previous year to that was 19%, and a year at 0%. Of course, that was preceded by a 6% and a 20%. So obviously it's showing its flaws and the obsolescence of the design in regard to the market. The best comparables for this property in terms of the cap rate are not the ones previously discussed. There's a sale of the Slate portfolio on page 34 and 35. And the Slate portfolio was a mix of mixed-use properties, older buildings like the Subject, mixed-use properties ranging from cross-dock to office, retail store, but generally they are all repurposed buildings. Many of them are. There were a few that were built to suit their current purpose. The repurposed buildings would be 1340 Sargent, 1030 Empress, 1680 Ellis, 1700 Ellis, 1935 Sargent, 1955 Sargent, and 2595 McGilvery. And that sale was a portfolio sale. The actual cap on that was 8.6. Stabilized with city parameters would actually be at 9.95. And to second guess the question, I asked the assessor earlier the question about portfolio sales. To be very clear, I asked him, the question was, a portfolio sale in the mass appraisal should not be used. This is not a mass appraisal. I worked for the purchaser and the vendor on that sale, and yes, they all sold together, but the cap is valid and researched because we had access to that information. And I think that's a good one to apply to this property, considering what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Neufeld?
Yeah, just a couple. So the 12% vacancy, you went over the vacancy history of this history of this
Right.
property. The rent roll, which I include, but you don't have the rent roll here, but when I go through the rent roll, there's no vacancy as of the reference date. Your workup is including the vacancy reported, I guess, probably for part of the year when something was vacant, correct? That's where that negative, that vacancy issue comes from?
Yeah, I noticed that, and I'm just, didn't want to take the time to go through it one by one, but,
Well, I guess I'll save you from going through because my question really
Yeah.
is, if there's you're using a 12% here and there is a vacancy in the property for a part of the year, you said there was a year where it's 0, a year where it's 12, we're allowing 5.5% or give or take OFS planners every year to kind of allow for that, buildings that fluctuate vacancy. Do you not think that a year like this, the 5.5% would be fine as well?
well, that's why I went through the earlier numbers. That no, its history is worse than that. The average over the past 8 years is 11.75%.
Okay, thank you. And when you're talking about your cap rates, I think you asked me a question before about using a portfolio sale. But you're saying it's fine for you because you can talk to the vendor and the seller and get more
Right, because
details and split it
the
up.
concept of mass appraisal, it doesn't provide the detail that you need on a portfolio sale to interview on the particulars of the deal. I've heard all the criticism from a couple of your colleagues about this sale, as well as someone says there's 3 missing properties. No, there's not. It's just, we work for both sides. I've been working for the site owner, representing him in arbitration hearings. We're very familiar with it. So, and that's the thing with mass appraisal, where you know, if you're just pulling a mailer off somebody and looking at it, you're not getting that sort of familiarity.
That's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. McIntyre?
No questions.
I don't either, thank you. We'll get that to Winston as well. And you have your file now, so you can proceed with the next item on the agenda, Mr. McIntyre. So that will be 1565 Wilson Place.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're looking at roll number 030719690000, 1565 Wilson Place. We have a 2020 assessed value at $9,813,000. This is a 2-story building with a full basement. Actually, you're built 1977 with an effective year built of 2005. We have a gross floor area of 48,795 and a leasable area of 48,795. The building is completely owner occupied. If you look at page 2, I've included an aerial photograph of the building. You can see exterior pictures on page 2. We are on the corner of Wilson Place and Waverly. You can see on page 3, I've included some more pictures to show the exterior of the building as well as the parking. Page 4, you can see they've always complied with our request for information. We have a sale of this property, January 18th, 2013 is when the current owner Payworks moved into the building. They paid $6.6 million at the time for the building. You can see on page 5, this building is broken up into 2 income streams. So we have, if you look on my page 2 quickly, you can see the building. So you can see how it's, right here on page 3, you just see kind of the front doors of the building, how the 2nd floor and 3rd floor are higher up, so it's like a bi-level when you walk in, you go down to the basement, and you go a little up to the main floor and the 2nd floor. So our 2 income streams, the 16,265 square feet is the office leasable square footage, so that's, sorry, basement leasable I should say. We have 16,000 square feet at $12.26, model generated. And then our standard for the next 2 floors, each floor is 16,265 square feet, so that works out to 2 floors of the building at $15.83 a square foot. You can look at it either as those split up or a blended rate of the building of $14.64. Again, we're using our standard OFS parameters for this one. We have a 5.5% vacancy rate, a shortfall of $7 per square foot, expenses 2%, overall cap of 6.55. This works out to a total value of $9,813,000. So you can see on page 6, I have some OFS rent comparables for this property. What I've chosen to look at, or put the most weight on this is the OFS with the large square footage. Again, we have a property here that's about 48,000 square feet. So if you see my first property is 114 Gary. This is a 2-story OFS on Gary Street. It has 74,000 square feet with a net rate of $15 a square foot. You can see closer to our subject property, comp 2 is 67 Scurfield Boulevard. This is a 1939 built 1-story property that's currently being leased out 25,000 square feet, or leased out at $18.92 a square foot. If you scroll down to comparable number 8, we have 365 Osborne. Again, this is built in 2006, so it's closer to our effective year of the building. We have 75,986 square feet of space over 2 stories, and that works out to $13.75 a square foot. Another one I spoke about before was comparable number 17, that's 180 Main Street. So this is a 2-story OFS that does, it's a call center setup, built in 1949, and it has 39,000 square feet at $12.75. So the averages across, and I've also included other OFSs, but they're much smaller square footages, but you can see the averages of that 1510. If you turn to page 7, I won't go in depth, I kind of went over these last time on the property views. We had basement space in the last one, but again, this basement space, so we have, it's been completely redone. It was remodeled, I believe, about within the last 2 years. I have the date here. But you can see these basement spaces have a weighted average of 1051, an average of 923, and a median of $9. Again, I would consider the closest comparable here of 865 Waverly. You have a 2000 build, which is similar to close to our effective year of the basement space in our building, and it works out to $12 a square foot. Our square footage for this property is, or our rate is $12.26. Page 9, reading the 6.55 capitalization rate, which is right in our range of OFS, as I went over before on our cap sheet. Page 11, again, it's a owner-occupied property, so they report expenses and there is no income. I've included, going forward on page 13, I've included the income and expense mail that was sent in for that 2013 sales questionnaire. So this is one where the property was bought and they filled out the sales questionnaire. So I just included it for some extra evidence. You can scroll down to page 16. This is just about that original 6.6 million sale that Payworks made on the property. So you can see going down, there's nothing really that sticks out about this one. Number 1 is the consideration paying, the correct total sale, yes. When was it agreed upon? October 26, 2012. Was this sale an arm's length open market transaction? Yes. Were there any items included like in the real estate? No. Going down, number 5 was a market value appraisal report done on this property. It was for $10.3 million. Again, this was subject to the renovations and base building work that was done after the fact. Is there a leaseback arrangement? No. And again, nothing really sticks out. Go down to property characteristics. Property used for the time of sale, it was an empty building. They're going to use it as a payroll service company. It is in fair condition. Do you intend to make major renovations? Yes. How much are you going to spend? They spent between January 18th and November 30th, 2013, they did $4.2 million in renovations on the property. And then were they going to demolish? No. Page 17, nothing sticks out there. It's a standard market transaction for mortgage. Page 18, I've just included pictures just to get a better idea of the space. So these are from inspection done January 20, 2016. This is just from perception. You can go through and just kind of take a peek at the quality of the office. You can see the main floor space on page 20. You can see the elevator setup. You can go through page 22. You've seen access to there's the access to the server room. 23, you can see the second floor office space. And then 25, I just included basements of the basement inspections. Basement inspection photos. This is the condition of the basement after it's been renovated. So you can see the windows. It's more of a bi-level setup where you have the windows at the top quarter of the wall. You can actually get natural light in there. It's what I would consider nice basement space. See page 27, gym in use. 28, again, there's the stairs going down to the basement. On page 28, access to the elevator. And then 29 is just the history of the permits on the property. You can see the value, the permit value on the right hand side. And then I don't know if yours has a lot of the blank pages, but that was a mistake. It just, I think back is my addenda. So if you have any questions on the property, please let me know.
Thank you. Steve, got any questions?
Yes. Page 5.
Page 5.
Is this all provided by the model?
Yes, this is all model generated.
You're sure?
Absolutely.
And on page 6, sorry, I didn't catch all the ones that you were keen on for comparables. Could you just repeat the numbers?
Yeah, just comparable number 1.
Okay.
I was just pointing out the larger square footage ones, so
Sure.
comparable number 2.
1, 2, yeah.
Comparable number 8.
Yeah.
Comparable number 17 are the ones I spoke to.
Okay. Do you think that's a typo, number 2?
67 square field?
Average year built?
The actual, so that would have been the actual year built?
Actually, you're real?
Probably a typo, 1939.
Yeah, I don't think the street was in there at the time, was it?
If that's on everyone, then it's a typo, but, yeah.
And you've selected, several of these were in the downtown area, I take it.
I mean, some of them are, yeah, for sure, there's lots on Waverly and,
And you did correct it, you did call the basement a bi-level, it's not.
Yes,
that
it's a,
bad.
yeah, bi-level. We have it as a basement leasable, is what our model has it.
So this is the same question I ask every time we take this property to hearing. Why are all of your comparables generally lower, but especially the means, and all the basement ones are lower than the applied rate, and your upper level ones are well below your average? So you, well below your weighted average. Well, you got 1583 in the upper level, your weighted average is 1420, median is 1456. Well, why would they be so much lower?
Like, why are the comparable,
Yeah.
why is my weighted average of the comparables lower than this
Right,
actual
yeah.
space? Well, the 32,000, and based on, again, we have an effective year built of 2005 on this property. So the model takes the effective year, and it has, again, I don't have too many 2005 comparables, like newer building comparables. Like, brand new buildings are often higher in rent, so our model uses an effective year to, in theory, just same with the basement, like, the basement rent's at the top of our basement rents, because again, we consider this a nice basement built in 2005, that's the easiest answer.
Right, that's what yeah, we'll get to that, don't worry. But, so, that's what you're saying, is that the effective year could have some factoring in that.
Absolutely.
And what about for the basement on page 7?
Why is the basement 1226?
Yeah,
Again, we have, like my one comparable I have, built in 2000, is $12 a square foot. I'm assuming a newer effective year, if we were to use that as a baseline of a nicer, newer basement, it is bringing the rent up a bit. We have 2005 effective year, so.
but you
that's-
have absolutely nothing exceeding $12, and yet your rent applied is, how do you even know it exists?
Again, these are the most basement net rents I've ever brought to a cycle, because usually it's tough to find basement ones. This is every net basement rent I could find.
Who's the user in 865 Waverly in the basement?
I forget the name of it, but
It's a
it's
medical facility, correct?
Yes, they built, it's a nice basement space.
But it's a medical facility.
Yes.
They do treatment down there, don't they?
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's a different category than the subject, is it not?
Again, it's just, I'm trying to show, this is every net basement rent that I could find.
Okay.
They're not
And-
common.
Now, you're saying that there's an effective year of 1977, and how did that come about?
The actual year built, we
Yeah.
have 1977.
Right.
And then when there's
how did it go-
renovations on the property, that brings up the
Right.
effective year to 2005.
What was the scope of renovations?
Again,
Oh, sorry, did you inspect?
I've never been to the
Oh,
building,
okay.
no, I just from the pictures that I've looked at and I show everybody.
Okay.
That's all I have.
So what was renovated?
There was a complete, from my understanding, tenant fit up for the building, so let's say new floors, painting, probably putting some new desks in there. It's a Payworks, it's a payroll company, so obviously if I did some server work, got the building prepared for being used for doing payroll, and then they completely renovated and added all that basement office.
So how does the server work change the effective year?
Pardon?
How does server work?
I'm not saying
change
that
the
I've changed the effective year, you just asked, from my understanding, those were the types
Right.
of things done to renovate the building.
So that's my question, how does the server work change the effective year?
I don't know if it does, I don't know how you can take into account server work and change an effective year.
Right, but server work was part of the permit, right?
It was stuff that happened, it was part of the stuff that happened in the building.
Have you seen the submissions on that particular permit?
The submissions?
Yeah.
Well, last time you asked about them, so
Yeah.
I did look at them, but
Okay.
again, it was part of the.
But you've seen the detailed pricing on the estimates, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely.
And, okay. And do you know what the major cost was in the basement fit up?
The major cost?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just from the picture I saw before with shelf space, I don't know what the most expensive part of bringing the basement to
And
office
do you know
is.
anything about the most recent repairs,
No,
the exterior?
like just redoing the outside,
Right.
yeah.
No.
I just, again, other than what's reported for permit value.
What was the previous use of this building, do you recall?
I do not recall.
Um, y- Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of the assessor, Mr. Lindhurst? Mr. McIntyre?
No question.
I don't either. Mr. Deepa, you were ahead?
Sure. Well, this is probably one of those most chronic bitter fights we have with the assessment department on this building. Just preface it that way. And it's bound to continue. The building was, I believe it was built and occupied by Manitoba Hydro and put on the market when it wasn't put on the market, they were still in there. They no longer had a need for it once their downtown building was built, and a company called Hopewell purchased it, and we're planning on repurposing it and putting it on the market. Payworks, who were in 850 Pembina, had a major expansion requirement for their business. They had 15,000 square feet there. They hired our company, our brokers, to find them another space, and they were quite desperate. This is the only building on the market. They made an unsolicited offer to Hopewell to purchase the building, and they acquired the building for their business. No disputing the price, but it doesn't meet the definition of market because it was forced undue pressure. It was to fulfill a business need, and Payworks does computerized payroll processing, much like a call center. I've done project management in call centers for quite some time, and the number one criteria with them isn't the real estate. It's human labor comes first, efficiencies come second, and real estate comes last. And if you have a contract, you've got to get it filled, because the real estate really doesn't matter. So they were under pressure. So to get the building, and they wanted to do it up nice, and they had a budget, and then they had their contractor come in. So of the $3.5 million spent, 2.1 million was just for their server, which meant they redid the server room, they had to bring cooling and halon and all the rest of it, and then they had to restring all their runs to their stations. That's not an improvement, not in the least. It's for their running their computers. That's what this big fight is about. $3.5 million spent, no disputing it. 2.1 was just for servers. The next cost on it, which was approximately $900,000, were for required code upgrades. And required code upgrades isn't make the building better, it just means you can actually use it and get an occupancy permit, because all the other buildings in the neighborhood have them. What they had to do was replace the rear stairwell with a steel system. They had to put in they had to widen their elevator because it didn't meet barrier-free standards. They had air handling that had to be changed, and they had fire suppression that had to be changed. So after all was said and done and expenses, they had about $400,000 or $500,000 left. So here's what they did. They replaced 7 windows where seals were blown. They put in a new rug, in this style of rug, which is the tile pattern. They put in some partition walls, glass partition walls, and they got a new front counter and a new kitchen counter. That wasn't any fancy upgrade. That was only, and they could only had the budget for the upper 2 floors. So a few years later, they expanded into the basement. By then, the codes were even stricter, and they spent a little over $1 million. And what they had to do there was what was almost all related to code with the same level of finish. there was nothing, there was no upgrade, and as I always like to remind people, any office building you go into has to do some redecorating every so often, and it's usually about $10 a square foot. Put in a new rug and some paint in the wall, that's all they spent, just the normal amount. Then in 2018, they found another problem with the building. Ironic that it's a meant of a hydro building, but the envelope wasn't secure, and what happened is that the metal flashing around the outside was catching all the condensation, and that beautiful, and by beautiful I'm joking, brown and orange paint job began to peel off because the condensation knocked all the paint off. So to cure it, they had to redo all their panels and put in insulation to stop the condensation problem, repair. So what's happened in a nutshell over the years is, very plain language, the assessment department has been chasing the sale and the permits. Instead, we have a forced sale and repairs and business improvements. We've produced all the information we can. I got a letter from the broker explaining the situation, how it was the only building on the market and they had a contract coming in. We have a very fat file here. It has all the breakdowns of the costs. We've had 2 contractors review them and submit them. So what happens is there is about, I think, 6 outstanding appeals on this property. So I come into a hearing, they drop it, the city appeals. Next hearing, it's confirmed, I appeal. The next hearing, it's lowered, they appeal. So they're outstanding. Now, the latest one from 18 was my appeal. The one before that is the city appeal. So this is going to be a fight. So I guess I'm telling you this because I know most boards of revision don't, you know, the minute they see all this is going on, they don't really take a position. And I think our point's pretty clear that half the boards understand the situation and have done something about it, and half the boards prefer not to be in this battle. But that is the reality. I asked a question about the rents. This has been the problem from day one. This is not a good 2005 building. This is a 1977 building that they're dealing with age-based deferred maintenance on, that's coming up over time. You know, I went and took pictures of all the windows just to show that they're still stamped 1977. And because that's the vintage of it. Now, I don't know if we put any of those in here, our pictures. There's some current pictures that show the work. The ceiling, by the way, is still open. They sprayed it. So the pictures on page 4 is the repair of the condensation damage on the outside. The bottom of page 4 is the basement, and that's the lovely renovation that the assessment department believes added value. Some spray foam on the underside of the deck, and these circular pieces of they're supposed to be noise suppression. Then on page 5 are more basement pictures. This is what we're looking at, open truss. Page 6 is showing the open truss and the cable trays running through the organization. That's the heart of this building, the cable trays, the data networks. That's the $2 million. Page 7 is, the bottom page is the basement before renovation, and that's actually all the parts that were replaced in the first renovation that were sitting there in the basement. You can see the paint peeling off in the picture on the top one. On page 8 are the server requirements. So there's the fiber optic box, and the other boxes on the wall, they're increased panels and TVSS, transvolt surge suppression for their computer network. One of the reasons you have to bring more power into a computer-dependent organization is that code isn't based on how much you draw, it's how much your potential for draw is. So most monitors these days, when I was doing them, they drew like 7 watts, but you can only put 8 monitors on a receptacle, or on a line. So then you had to get a new line in. And then you get IT guys who, I think.
Let me go a long way, but I mean, what you're doing is actually, can't you get to the heart of it? I mean, all these things you're saying is not really taking the square.
Well, I think it should matter.
Well,
I think, I want
I want to stop you, I'm just thinking that it's,
Well, I want you to know the background and of what this dispute is about. We have, I'll repeat it again, they're chasing a sale that was under
No, we
new
heard that.
pressure, and they're chasing permits for work that had to do for upgrading their computer equipment.
okay, we heard that, and you're indicating that it was spent on things that don't improve the building but made it suitable for your client.
You know, the only way to shut me up is tell me I'm right.
Well, you know, I don't know if I can do that or not, because I'm only one person here, but you're all, almost good enough to say to me to do that.
If I ever can reach that stage, boy, it would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna speed this. Page 11 is the new carpet, took a picture of it, new tile, that was the upgrade. Page 12, there's a picture of the stamped windows. And you can see all the rest of the pictures. We included classifications of buildings on page 18, just to show where this building fits in the classes. And, sorry, these weren't suburban, disregard that. Fine. So the building will not command rents that the assessor has stated. We were looking at $12.50 on the upper floor, and again, we're looking at similar properties. There are a number of other ones in the neighborhood that bear some resemblance to the subject property. So we have 895 Waverly across the street at $12.50, and the other ones we discussed earlier. The basement, we didn't give you a basement calculation or a valuation. I do agree with the assessor that 1483 Pembina is probably the only similar property we're going to see. The sites, those units are smaller, but it is a bi-level style. It's better located, but it's older. And it's our property too, so we're familiar with it and know that it has been converted from a semi-gross building to a net building, and those are ranging for the smaller units, $8 to $9. It's probably a fair comparison. On the capitalization rate, not entirely sure that, given the problems with the building, and a buyer would know that these problems are still coming up, the code problem, which has been remedied for now, and the condensation problem, which is hopefully corrected, but we still are dealing with an older building with age-related deficiencies. So I think a higher cap rate is called for on this property. Oh, and another thing about it, you'll notice that we have different square footages. This is a single tenant building, so we have taken the floor plate times 3, because that's the correct measurement terminology to be used. And I don't, the assessor's got some deductions here. They're not major. But I think this is the right way to measure it, but the point here is that it can't be demised as a multi-tenant property right now because of the way the stairwells work. You'd have to install another set of stairwells and another approach. It's only a single tenant building, so you couldn't do like the competitive properties, say like 865 Waverly is one of the assessor's comps, and it's got full 2 elevators in it, it's got central hallways, and you access them all. This doesn't have that ability to be demised, so it's one building. So that's a negative in the marketplace. You need one tenant unless you're willing to spend money on conversion. So, what else is appealing this decision?
Well, it must be you, because the last assessment you have down is $8,075,000, and you're asking now for $5,500,000, so
Yeah,
You know, it must be used good in that sense.
well, I just wanted, you know what, probably let's move on, but, I'm not entirely sure about the 5.5, number. I think we were, it's difficult for us to put a value on this when we have this big, long history in front of us, behind us, to deal with.
Well, we'll figure a number for you.
I'm sure you will.
Any questions, Mr. Defoe?
Just a couple. So you would agree that the original owner, before Payworks, the one that just sold it in 2013, they bought it in 2006 for $5.4 million, correct?
Yeah, they bought it with, Hydro, on the hook for, I think they had, I was working for the company that was doing the transaction at the time. Yeah. Hydro vacated in 2011. So when they purchased it, they still had 5 more years left on the lease. So their hope was that gave them 5 years to come up with a suitable tenant.
And then Payworks bought the building as it was in January 18, 2013 for $6.6 million, correct?
That's correct.
Before they put anything into it, whether we disagree on the amount that it's worth that they put in, but
We don't disagree on the value.
it was
we
an
just disagree on
arm's length sale.
participation.
Arm's length sale, right? You were saying motivated because they were forced to buy a bigger space because they were just growing so fast and they just needed more room. So they paid $6.6 million for this, and then today you're asking for 5.5.
You know,
And the reason is because there's issues with the building that need to be fixed.
No, I'm sorry, I just wanted to just double check some of the, this has been through case management, and I don't know if we have a more up-to-date number. Aaron, you're not sworn in, are you?
He's not.
No, in other year, we did case manage this, and, you know, we were not as low as 5.5 million, that is true. It's difficult to put forward a serious number when, with this property, with the amount of issues we have with it. I think that when you look at it, our rents are good. The capitalization rate is something that you could potentially review. With, you know, a building like this, of course, in the condition and the issues, is never going to go in 6.5, because first of all, 6.5 doesn't exist. And secondly, that's like a very, very aggressive number. That's based on a good upside, being able to draw on higher rents in future years. This building doesn't have that capability. So it's just a little bit difficult because the amount of litigation that will be coming out of this property is, we're scared of putting forward a settlement number.
So those are all my
Is that a fair
questions.
answer?
Those are all my questions, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
No questions.
So I'm just reiterating, so we don't have a number from you then, because you say your number that you're asking 5,502,000 is not really, you have another number somewhere else and you're not giving us that is higher than that.
Well, there's going to be litigation on this property in the
I
near
understand, but
future.
you're asking us to
And
make that
you're-
decision
Yeah,
today.
I know, exactly,
Yeah.
and that's why you're independent, you can make that decision. And so my answer to you is, I'm very, very comfortable with the rental table.
Well, you showed us some calculations here that arrived at a 5,502. So when you show arithmetic and then establish your number and you have some credibility, I would think, before us, I would think that you're ready
Well, I
to
didn't,
signal.
right, but I
you know.
didn't, just for the record, I didn't prepare this.
Well, yeah, you brought it here and you're speaking on it,
No,
it's your
that's
material.
true.
No, hang on, you knew you had a hearing today, and you knew that you had to be prepared for it. And I'm sure that the material that you got for it, you thought would defend what you're asking for.
Well, I'm also looking at previous decisions where the board changed it to 4.2 million.
And I'm looking at the previous assessment where it was changed to 8.75.
Correct, and I've got one here at 7.6, and then I've got another one here at 5.8.
Okay, you know what, we're not getting anywhere here, so my next question is, and I think that the assessor asked the same question. You indicate that when it was sold, it was a property and your principal needed the property, there was nothing else for sale, so they bought it
Right.
and overpaid for it because they needed a property so badly.
That's right.
Okay, and as Mr. Spacek has said to you, well, it also sold in January 2006 for 5.4 million, which is only 18% difference in a period of 7 years. And so are you saying that that was overpaid for as well in January of 2006?
No,
Because 5.4 is less than what you're
Okay.
asking for here.
in
Without all your permits.
2006, the company that bought it, they knew they had 5 years left on a hydro lease. And a hydro lease is deemed to be a good investment. And also, they had 5 years to lease the site out to new tenants. So that was the decision-making at the time. And in the long and short of it, they didn't do too badly when they found a desperate purchaser. They got
Yeah,
lucky.
You did, yeah.
And answer, the other question is, there was, last year's order, this actually should have been put in here as well. There were 2 orders. The first on the reassessment was at $5,884,000 for 2018. Then there was a supplemental assessment for the basement work, which then ended up with no change. And basically, the city put forth their original position, and that particular board found their way. That's life, right? And they appealed that 2018 decision at 5,884. So I'm not crazy coming here and saying 5,502. It's been on the books before at 5,884.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. And 905 Weaver Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're at roll number 10000007500. We have a 2020 assessed value, $5,525,000. This is a 2-story building located at 905 Waverly. We have 26,944 gross area and 26,944 leasable area. Page 2, you can see a picture of the building. Right on the corner of Waverly and Victoria Drive. Page 3, some more street views from the buildings and parking. The owners have always complied with their request for information, and again, there's a sale July 6, 2015 for $4.5 million. So this building is valued at 26,944 square feet at $15.25 a square foot. We have our standard OFS parameters: 5% vacancy, 2% expenses, $7 shortfall. NOI works out to $370,158, capped at 6.7%, and that works out to the 5.525. So I've included rent comparables on page 6. We have rents along Waverly here. You see comparable number 1, 1,000 Waverly is at $14.50. Comparable number 4, we have 1,400 Taylor, 2-year lease at $16. That's 18,000 square feet. You'll see these comparable number 8, 1345 Taylor. We have a 1999 year built, 14,000 square feet at $16. We have two 1345 Waverleys, comparable to 18 and 19, built in 1998. At 1550 and 1650, and then I've included more comparables, in the area along here on Waverly, and you can see that the average works out to $15.14, weighted average of $14.65, and a median of $14.90. Page 7 is that income approach workup. Page 8 is our cap sheet. Again, page 10, we received the mailer. This is for 905 Waverly Inc. So again, and maybe I'm sure this will come up, but what's reported here is a base office rent. They're 420. If you look at the middle of the top, base office rent of 422,000. A common area recovery of 150,000. CAM recovery from previous years of 9,000. So again, I think it came up before, and they thought that 905 Waverly is owner occupied. If you turn to page 14, page 15, there is a commercial rent of 1550 reported for a 10-year lease from 15 to 25 from 24/7 New Touch Inc. With a common area of $5.50. So when I see this, I see a net rent, but again, Mr. Meeple knows it's the owner that's maybe reporting a book rent. That could, maybe that's something that'll come up, but I see a net rent of $15.50 on this building, a total of $21. But again, maybe I am mistaken on that one, but I'm sure that will come up. So if there's any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Mr. Meeple, any questions?
Yeah. Was this all model generated again?
Yes.
Now, with this particular class, is this OFS as well?
Yes, OFS.
And in the last 2 years, what was your change in OFS? I was just looking through some of the other properties to see what it was 2 years ago.
Sorry, what was the question?
What was your OFS rate 2 years ago?
Like for rent?
No, sorry, for capitalization.
I don't know offhand.
Did it change?
I imagine it's probably pretty close for at the 26,000 square feet, probably around that 6 to 6.7% somewhere in there, and we probably went up a bit. Am I mistaken? I don't know. I don't know offhand.
Okay, well, I'm just looking at OFS previous years. 5.5 to 6.75 on the 20th to the 80th percentile. And now your new numbers are 6.2 to 7.3, so the numbers rose.
Yes.
The capitalization rates rose in the
Overall.
last 2 years. And that's not inconsistent with what I've been saying, is that they're higher, not lower.
Not inconsistent with what you said.
And would you recall what the recommendation was 2 years ago, what the cap rate was?
For the recommendation?
Yes, there's a recommendation.
And you accepted it?
Yes, they did.
Okay, I don't know.
Those are my only questions, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. McIntyre?
No questions.
Ms. Blinkhurst? I don't have any either. Mr. Meeple?
Okay, 2 years ago, the assessor recommended a value of 4.5 million based on a cap rate of 7.54%, which we accepted. And the rent used was $14.92 a square foot. There's not a coincidence that the value was $4,500,000. Because we did not disagree with the sale. Now, I said earlier that we use this for a cap rate, and it's not a cap rate. I didn't prepare that, and I missed that. It's an owner-occupied building, so they bought it from Stantec. I thought Stantec had a period of tenancy in there after the purchase, but apparently not long enough, in my opinion, to satisfy as being an investment sale. So it was purchased as an end user need. 24/7 are the owners and tenants. We had done a calculation on that basis that rent was actually real because, and there were non-recoverables in it as well. The net actually worked out to $13.94. So, now our market rents on page 4 are are in and around that same area, and a couple we were looking at in comparison to this were at 850 Pembina, and 850 Pembina is like the subject property. It's a single-floor office building that's a bit newer construction. And 850 Pembina, incidentally, I noticed that the assessor had some numbers on 850 Pembina as well, and I didn't question him about it because he never relied on them, but his numbers were not correct. There were some semi-gross rents in there. We managed the property, and the ones that were actually renewed in there were at 14 and 1352. So they do support what we're looking at. And the other properties, 895 Waverly again that could include some second floor space though, so that's why that rate's a little bit lower. But when we were talking about the other properties earlier, they all had multi-level buildings. So our rent is appropriate, and we capped it at 8% simply because the market doesn't recognize low rates like that. There's no opportunity to make money on a building in the 6%. That's a fallacy. None of our rates would even go that low. Now, this property probably touches on the extreme limits of our suburban office calculation. And on page 7, our suburban office range is 6.5 to 7.25, but as I mentioned, that includes, there's an explanation of that on page 24, and how we do it, and our actual rates range from 7.5 to 8.25. That's not right. Somebody should proof these things, maybe me. Our actual rates would actually vary on good ones from 7 to 7.75, we put in 8. So perhaps we should modify that downward slightly. There's nothing wrong with the sale at $4,500,000. It was a good, clean sale, no motivation. I mean, we knew this purchaser was collecting buildings all around the city without too much direction. So I don't think there was, the building became available when Stantec vacated and they bought it. Hadn't been them, it would have been somebody else. So I think $4,500,000 is fair, and as myself and the assessor both agree, the market hasn't shown a difference in the cap side. As a matter of fact, it's shown an increase in cap rate. So we'll just modify that number, if you won't mind, to $4,500,000 to match the sale. Which incidentally was the same way the last order was written.
Oh. Okay, that's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a couple
Any
questions.
questions? Yes.
Just a couple questions. So, your value proposed was $4,047,000, but you're saying $4.5 million is your new.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm just reviewing this now, and that's my personal
Okay.
take on it. Last year assessment, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this in the file, but this was the assessor recommendation at $4,500,000, and I can't see that the market's improved.
Okay. And then, so you agree that the new lease in place, 1,550 a square foot, if you were using actuals here, but the actuals in place now are 1,550 a square foot for 24/7.
Well, that's not the way we calculated it, and I could look at it and waste the board's time, but it's not a real lease.
Okay, so it is owner occupied?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
I mean, it might be from one holding company to another holding company, but.
But 24/7 in touch is the owner of this building?
That's
you're saying?
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. One second. And then I just wanted to, I believe that is all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. McIntyre?
No questions.
Any questions, Mr. Lyndhurst? I don't have any questions. You'll hear from us soon, thank you.